Good afternoon. It's Wednesday, October 11th, 2023. This is a school board workshop, and the time is 12 o'clock noon. There are 6 items on the agenda. The first item is the superintendent annual evaluation. The second item is legislative priorities. Third item is middle school proximity. Fourth item is strategic plan update. Fifth item is additional voted operational millage discussion. And the sixth item is the agenda review of the October 17th regular agenda. We will begin with the superintendent's annual evaluation. Facilitating this discussion is Dr. Savage, Chief Strategy Officer. Dr. Savage, please proceed.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, good afternoon, rather. Chairman-persons, Vice Chair Fisher, esteemed board members, Dr. Bernier, and Attorney Dupuy-Bruno. Today's presentation is an overview to kick off the superintendent's annual evaluation process for this year. Let's start by reviewing the evaluation annual cycle. And so this is not to be confused with the interim evaluation, which is really a mid-year evaluation. So you can see the first month in July. That is where the interim evaluation is completed for the superintendent. Then the board members receive the notice in August that per the superintendent's contract that he needs to be evaluated. In September, October is when the superintendent works to complete a self-evaluation, and then beginning in October, working through November, board members work to complete the superintendent's annual evaluation. In November, once that is completed, an annual evaluation results are compiled to produce the board's evaluation of the superintendent as an action item. And then January, the board then discusses goals for the superintendent, and the superintendent also begins the 360 assessment process. That 360 assessment process wraps by June, and so that is, again, the annual evaluation cycle at a glance. To drill into specific milestones for this year, October 11th is today. That is where we are to review the process as well as the instrument. By the 20th, the superintendent will have provided his self-evaluation to the board. That will allow the board members to commence looking first considering the superintendent's self-evaluation and any evidence or conversation the board wishes to have with the superintendent, so that the board members can begin that process of completing their independent individual ratings utilizing the tools we have. By November 15th, that process should be concluded. They are then all compiled following our board policies to create that into a board action meeting that then represents the totality of the evaluation and that finalized, pulling all those results together following policy to do so. Just to do a quick glance of the major sections of the evaluation instrument, and just for the board's awareness that that instrument is also attached to the board agenda item for this, but the first section is section 1, which is the professional competencies. These are 8 leadership standards, each with 8 indicators deriving that, so that's a total of 64 indicators that the board members have to create a rating for. Then in section 2, there's the district priority initiatives. This was originally, for the first evaluation for Dr. Bernier, it was based upon his entry plan framework, and so that framework has now been extended to completion. So now we are in the application stage of that framework, where it's not just the idea of some of these things, it's really the results of those things and the ongoing maturity of some of that initial work. And then that section will be replaced by goals that the board sets for the superintendent in January, which we'll go into a little bit more detail. But that then replaces that section, so there can be those short-term things that we want to see happen within a year, similar to the entry plan, to allow to be focused on those pieces that don't necessarily fit in other areas. A good example of that would be like the middle school proximity plan. That section is derived of 3 specific goals, each with 8 objectives for a total of 24 objectives, following the same scoring framework as section 1. Section 3 is the strategic plan goals. That's the urgency of making sure we had our plan ready to kick off today, which is a later presentation, but to now have those new goals that are intended to be the way that the superintendent would like to be held accountable. It's the results. It's not so much about just the competencies and these other goals, but are we moving the needle with the things that matter for the district? And that leads with student outcomes. And so all of those individual strategic plan goals and KPIs are built into that third section. And so this reflects, of course, the baseline year as we've just devised that plan, but that has 5 priorities with 21 key performance indicators. Just to remind the board again, the 4 ratings, which are consistent for all of our evaluation tools, even for our own staff: highly effective, effective, needs improvement, and unsatisfactory. Just to remind again, effective means achieving the standard. That is the desired level of performance to earn a level 3. That is where staff we want them to be. However, if folks go above and beyond and extend to higher levels of application where their impact is more substantial, that's where highly effective comes in. Needs improvement means that they are not yet at that standard that needs to be, which is the effective standard, and unsatisfactory scores to ensure that if a rating is unsatisfactory, it is clearly identified as an area that is absolutely not satisfactory to the board in this case. I just went through those ratings, so I'm not going to read them specifically, but it just restates essentially what I said. Moving into section 1, these are the 8 categories, the professional competency standards that the superintendent is evaluated against, and all the specific indicators fit within those 8 broad standards. Section 2. Again, just to reiterate, these are derived from superintendent priorities, major initiatives, and projects. A good example from the prior superintendent, Dr. Atkins, would have his Big 5. The Big 5 would have been reflected in something like this. These are things that are designed to be achieved specifically within that year, while the strategic plan is a far-reaching, outcomes-driven approach to over multiple years, 3 to 5 years as a target. These are things that have to be or should be accomplished in a single year. So an example from year 1 was the elementary proximity plan, seeing it to its completion. That's a great example of a major initiative that required tremendous resources, support, and engagement that was accomplished. That is the type of thing that would fit into it. There are others, for example, and they don't always have to be the student-facing ones. They can be issues such as a major adoption of something like our PeopleSoft revision or others. Those are the other kinds of things that can fit into that area. The board will have an opportunity in January, to actually start to make suggestions on this and set some specific goals for this year that we could evaluate a year from now. Again, it's under the same scoring rubric. Moving into section 3, this is pretty straightforward. The goals and targets are set forward in the strategic plan, and so those are the same things for section 3, basically expecting that the superintendent, as the lead executive for the district, is getting forward movement in those critical areas that the board has supported are their major priorities as defined by their KPIs. Where we are in terms of this year is that for fiscal year 23, we have 50% of the weight for the professional competencies and 50% for the district priority initiatives. Since the strategic plan goals are in their baseline year, we don't have necessarily results for some of those areas, especially the ones that are newly measured, and we don't yet even have our finalized academic data from the state yet, but we will in December. But this gives you not just a look at today, but a look at a year from today, when we can look at how the shifting in scoring would occur, again, pursuant to any feedback the board wishes to give. 50-50 basically for sections 1 and 2 today, but in fiscal year 24, a year from now, it would be only a quarter for the professional competencies, a quarter for those priority initiatives, and the lion's share, half of the evaluation, is done strictly by results achieved. The scoring is used the same way for all of these particular categories, and you can see that reflected below. So just to give that quick look ahead, I've made this reference several times, but it's important because it's a new part of this, is that in January, the board is supposed to be discussing goals for the superintendent, and that's a part of also the Dr. Bernier's employment contract, that the board will do this at this time period, but it aligns with this evaluation as well. It's also that opportunity, as I reminded earlier, that 360 assessment process, which is not a formal part of the superintendent's evaluation. It is an opportunity more as a professional professional development activity for the superintendent to gain insight from all the different groups that he works with, to understand how his performance is with all those different groups from all those different perspectives. That then informs his own personal learning journey and any additional resources that he requires to try to help inform that process. That is supposed to be completed by June, but certainly if it's completed earlier, Dr. Bernier would let you know that. So that does bring us to the end of this section. So with that said, before I turn things over to the board for discussion, and again, I do have the tool, so if there's any aspect of the tool you want to look at, we are able to do that today. But before I do that, I first want to defer to Dr. Bernier. Do you have any comments, sir, that you'd wish before we pass back for board discussion?
The only thing I would like to add, Dr. Savage, besides my thank you to you for doing the hard yeoman's work and presenting this information, is that the 24 year will be something different for this board. This evaluation process will, in a sense, cease with me based upon my determination not to run for the elected post. So this will be the final evaluation you would do on my behalf prior to me leaving the system. And you won't have an evaluation cycle for the newest superintendent. So I just want to put that into context. I know Dr. Savage and I were preparing this for potentially different outcomes. So I want to be clear on that 24 scoring. Currently is the cards will play out. That will not be an opportunity necessarily for you and the new superintendent. So thank you.
All right, board members, do you have any comments or discussion on this? Yeah, I'm sorry, someone raise their hand? Nope? Then I'll go. I just wanted to say that this is a great tool, and it'll be sunsetted in a year, because that's just for the public to realize that the board does not do a evaluation of an elected official. So that's just for that, just for the record. Any other comments? Ms. Giovanelli.
So how do we talk about our achievements, or how this board, because the superintendent will still be part of this board. How do we talk about our achievements, or what our successes are, or, our goals, if we don't have some kind of evaluation? We're just going to strictly evaluate ourselves, and how does the superintendent piece play into that? I still think we have to talk about it openly, or if you don't talk about something, then you're going to assume everything's grand. And we have strictly, we know we have much more work to do and achievements to make. And so how do we do that, like in this scenario? The other question I had real quick was the 360 assessment, the results. We received the results on the board attorney when they were done, but we don't get them for the superintendent. So how do we know what the people that is governed under the superintendent, how they feel, or how they're, address, their concerns in the, in leadership? Thank you. That's my.
Ms. Jordan?
To Ms. Giovanelli's point, Mr. Chair, if I may, a 360 assessment is just that. It's an assessment. It's not part of an evaluation process. It's an opportunity for me in my superintendent's requirement for self-evaluation. I will provide that information by October 20th regarding that information, what I've been doing to work on what the 360 told me and informed me that would be areas of growth opportunities as well as areas of strength. It specifically is not reported, and I assume that Ms. Kathy Dupuy-Bruno did that of her own accord regarding her 360 assessment. But I've been just clear when I came here, when we were talking about 360s, they're really for the individual. They're really something that we want to develop around, but for transparency, I will make sure that in my self-evaluation, you're provided that information.
Thank you. Ms. Jordan.
I was going to say exactly that. But then also I do agree with Ms. Giovanelli. Even though we know that we do not evaluate an elected official, that does not prohibit us from actually doing an evaluation for our own purpose. So that way we understand or recommend what we feel that we are accomplishing or not. They can take it or leave it, but at least we are having that conversation about the goals and are they being met. So I do agree that something should still be done.
Yeah. I'm sure we should not call it an evaluation. Mr. DePay-Bruno?
Yeah, I to Ms. Jordan's point, you can talk about your data, you can talk about your student achievement, you can talk about your progress, you can have those discussions on the dais with the superintendent. That's all legitimate, that is part of your oversight, that's part of your job. What you can't do is make a evaluation on the person's performance based on that data. So that's where the line has to be drawn. And, but certainly you can discuss the data and how you are progressing and make recommendations to the superintendent.
Go ahead, Ms. Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Pre-Bruno, but in order to do that, we would have to have a mechanism to do that, a format, if you will, to do that. Dr. Savage?
Mr. Fisher? Oh, sorry.
Oh, I just, just part of this conversation, the later, Teddy will be talking about the district strategic plan. While that is not an evaluation of the superintendent, it is the board's focus on the actual results that matter to the board, and the cadence that we'll be presenting later today will show how often that will be in front of the board for an opportunity to reflect on how the district is performing on all the areas that the board has defined as critical outcomes that they are interested in seeing improving. So I did want to mention that you will get, it's a preview, it just lines to that, that it will be covered later on today, just not in this presentation today.
Thank you for that explanation. I was going to say exactly the same thing, but not as well. Mr. Fisher, you have it?
Thank you, Chair. And that was kind of, I don't want to go too off topic here, but that was kind of the genesis of talking about during the elected superintendent, the pay part, having a discussion, yearly, annual discussion. So I kind of figured that was kind of, our date for some of that stuff outside of what we normally talk about. So thank you.
Any other comments on? All right. Dr. Savage, thank you. Next is the legislative priorities. Dr. Bernero, do you like to introduce this?
I would certainly like to introduce Angel Gomez, who's taking his seat maybe for the first time to present on behalf of his new position as the Director of Communications and Government Relations. I will tell you that Mr. Gomez is directly back from Tallahassee just a few minutes ago, where he spent the better part of yesterday working with our lobbyists from Gray Robinson, Kim McDougall, in anticipation of your site visits to Tallahassee next week. Angel will be looking at the legislative priorities. I know you've worked with him one-on-one. This may be the first time you'll see your body of work coming together collectively, and an opportunity for you to provide additional input and for us to revise any documents prior to our lobbying effort and meeting with the state legislatures next week. So I'll turn it back to Mr. Gomez.
Thank you, Dr. Bernier. I'm getting some assistance getting out of this. My apologies. No idea how to fight. Okay, well, you were just about to see a grown man cry. But we didn't have to, thanks to Joel. My apologies about this. Thank you, Dr. Rainier, chairmanspersons and vice chair and the board. Great to be here. Like the superintendent said, I just came back from Tallahassee. It was a couple, 1.5 days full of action. Most of it driving, but it was great. It was, I think we got a lot accomplished on the first week. This is the first week of committee meetings, and the Senate met yesterday, and the committee was the pre-K through 12 education committee, and they spoke about cut scores for our FAST testing. But down now to the item on the agenda, which is, oh bless you, our legislative priorities, or like I like to call this is really, bless you again, this is really our legislative program, okay? This is that real wide angle, 30,000 feet view of what we're doing. These are not the one-on-ones, the one-pagers, the detail ones. This is the general platform that we're pushing for the district. And if you look in there, one of the first things that we come across is that we have under increased student achievement, we have a couple of CTE asks. These are a couple of appropriations. The first one talks about, is what I'm calling the second phase of what was last year's over appropriation that we received $2.5 million to do that whole pre-construction engineering, architectural design for the Cape Coral Technical College building, the expansion, right? So last year we received $2.5 million to make that expansion there at Cape Coral, those two buildings. This is the ask for $2.1 million so we can continue on phase 2. Now the construction part. This is where we're saying we would like to go ahead and now start building classrooms. And this is the next stage. I believe this is scheduled at some point to take place on 2025. So we're starting to ask, obviously now, since it's coming up soon. The next ask is also an appropriation, also for CTE, and a couple of you, many of you spoke to me in regards to having something similar on the east side of town, on the east side of Lee County. So in the case of the east side of Lee County, we're looking into actually building an annex for possibly Fort Myers. Fort Myers Technical College will have an annex. And I'm saying Lehigh Acres, like I have control of where it's going to be, but I know that's east of 75, and there's a lot of kids, there are a lot of kids there. So in that area on the east, and it will be it will not be an addition to a school. The plan is to have its own small little annex. So that one requires a little more money. So we're asking for $2.5 million, and we're letting the legislators know that we have skin in this game, and we're going to match every dollar for every dollar. So basically we're also putting 2.5, right? So the total is $5 million, but we're not asking for all of it. We're going to be right there with them. They're going to be helping us with this if this appropriation happens to pass. Right after that, we have the usual. This is one that I truly believe that we need to continue pushing for, and is that per student funding increase of 5%. You can see in there in fiscal year 24, right now, it was 8933. We're asking for that 5% to go up 9380. All right, so in regards to safety, there is one. Actually, there are two appropriations is safety, but the first priority there is to support an increase in the Safe Schools allocation in the FEFP, and then after that we have two appropriations. One is for $500,000 to continue the success of the after-school programming, taking care for our students, and the other one is used to be 2 or 3 different ones, and with it we were able to combine it into one manageable appropriation, and this one is for $1 million, and it's pretty much to add a little more, or to add more layers. Our schools are secure and safe, but adding more layers of safety never hurts, and that is for some of those perimeter fencing that may be needed in some schools, and some of those outdoor corridors that are not fenced in, and something that will be new to us, but it's not new to other districts. It's something that is a mobile response unit that we're, and I laugh because it's such a long name, that we are calling the School District Mobile Disaster Leadership Response Vehicle. Okay, I'm sure we'll put an acronym together for you guys, but yeah, it's a long, and it's a response, it's a mobile disaster because it's not just for safety, it's also for any natural disaster, anything that may be needed. You know, something happens, we go there, everything, all hands are deck, and everybody, all the resources that are needed are there to tag along with all the others that are working from the district, from the county, from wherever it is, and law enforcement. So that will be that ask. In regards to teacher certification and retention, you guys are familiar with these. The social workers, and I made sure to ask this question because a couple of you asked me this question in regards to, wasn't this something that we found out last year that the social workers didn't need? In fact, they do need it. Okay, so we're asking the same ask for to exclude the school social workers from the instructional staff that must take and pass the professional education exam. Okay, so that's a continuation. All of this was massaged and verified also by Kim McDougall from Great Robinson. So finally, we ended up with the right wording. And then one, which is the ask that many districts have already on their legislative program, which is to ask to please allow teachers, and in this case, it was brought also to my attention to also include administrators, to come back and return after 2 months after their retirement instead of 1 year. And I want to dig a little bit into that, even though you haven't asked me a question, but you're probably wondering why we included both and how do they differentiate. I'm glad you asked. The one about the teachers, right? So the teachers, we're always asking for the teachers to come back. I don't believe it's going to be an issue for now, but we don't want to stop having the ask on our legislative program because the teachers were extended recently for 2 years. Now they can actually stay as long as 10 years as part of their drop. So for the next couple of years, they may not come into play, right? And the administrators were actually given 3 more years, so they can do up to 8. So we have them in place. The one thing is that obviously we know that they're not coming back most likely. If they're staying and extending, they're extending in what they're doing now, not teaching, right? So they're probably still doing administration. But we need to continue that ask because at some point these things may go away. And at least we have the continuity of asking like in many other districts. All right, so the difference is in regards to administrators, they can come back after a year harmless, but the truth is they can come back after 6 months. But in order for them to do that, they would have to forego their retirement for the following 6. So really, to come back like a teacher would, the way we're asking, and be held harmless, is really a year at this point. So that's why we left it like that. We just added administrators, all right? School facilities utilization. It was there last year. I think this is a great ask. I think this is the opener to many conversations in Tallahassee. We're asking to include pre-K, simple enough, as part of our fish. Let's include that because, they're in our schools, so try to at least get them in there to create more revenue. Okay? So that's a simple ask that you guys understand. Most of your asks for post-Hurricane Ian recovery, you guys, I say you guys because I wasn't here last year, but I'm going to throw myself in there, and I'm going to enjoy the glory of the fact that we were very successful at asking specific following the needs that the district had and asking for appropriations and different asks to the legislators, and they were very generous helping us as a district in our attempts for recovery. So all of that is in place. And aside from thanking the governor and the legislators and everybody else there, all we have to do is continue keeping that ball rolling, reminding everyone that we understand that other districts were hit with another storm recently, but we continue to recover, and our full recovery, which sums up to in the neighborhood of $300 million, is nowhere near being finished, and we have and we're moving very rapidly, and we're being very efficient like we do as we do things. Some of that shows on the fact that the overall cost has actually dropped a little bit because of how fast we go from the planning to the actual execution of the construction. And what has actually helped us a lot, from what I understand, has been that the fact that the legislators allowed us to use that piggybacking and be on the threshold and being able to bypass a lot of what would have been required to complete blueprints and contracts and the acquiring of services and construction services from different companies and builders. That sunsets this December. Right, December 31st. So what we're asking legislators as part of that is that they please extend that for one more year, and we're using the truth, which is, we still have a lot of roofs to be replaced, a lot of construction that needs to take place, and it will be great for us to continue that. And it actually explains on that paragraph the importance of that, so they can just extend it, not indefinitely, just for one more year. And that will allow us to expedite the process and be ahead of track if we can. And lastly, the big word, deregulation. There are so many deregulations that people are, all different boards. I was there yesterday listening to what other districts are trying to deregulate and asking, and the complexity of asking for one thing to be deregulated and how it ties up with many layers of other legislation that we do not know about, right? The ultimate goal will be to really, the big umbrella would be to, if we're going to deregulate, let's go ahead and have all public schools have the same regulatory flexibility altogether, right? All public schools. And will that happen? I'm not quite sure that will happen, but it's the end goal. To get granular in regards to what specific the regulations are beneficial to us as a district. After conversation with Kim McDougall, I think we need to wait a little bit. The FSBA, the Superintendent's Organization, and in particular, the Senate is doing a lot of deep work in regards to some of the research required to really find the regulations that will have the biggest bang for the buck for districts. They're asking everybody. And what we can do, I'm really good at doing this. You can ask my mom. She thinks I'm amazing. But the Senate and all of their people, they're incredibly good at going into those layers. At some point soon, we'll have a list of those deregulations, and then we can discuss which ones to focus on and support of as part of our platform, and create a one-pager so we can then share that during the actual session. So I'm thinking around the December time, before we go on winter break, we'll have that done. Because by then, everyone who's collecting information in regards to the regulations will have a product on what, and not all of them will apply equally to all districts. So we need to look at that and see what applies to us. And I'll meet with each one of you, and we'll look into that, and we'll present it to the board, okay? Other than that, everything's still the same. The one-pagers are made. We are ready for next week, for our visit next week. And at this time, I'll just take questions that I might possibly be able to answer. Thank you for your time.
Dr. Bernier, you have anything you would like to add to that before the
I would.
board?
I would like to talk about a little bit of the work all of you have done. I mean, clearly you have outlined some very specific areas, and I appreciate the fact that student achievement. Clearly, all of you have done a great amount of work, and I really appreciate the fact that you've outlined in the legislative priorities as a first and foremost item, increased student achievement. Certainly, the idea of expanding our career and technical education programs has been on the agenda multiple times, and we have received support both from the Senate and the House to continue to move forward. This is a little more clear that not only will we continue to help Cape Coral Technical College expand into those areas that our community is asking for, such as welding technology, marine service, and the other building trades, but it also gives us an opportunity to potentially put a footprint down in Lehigh Acres with an annex campus. So let's be clear that really technical centers get approved at the state level, but this gives us an opportunity to start proving our model, which would be interesting from the aspect of with this potential 2.5 to create, we could use those to do the architectural design services and the other things that we need to begin to really look at what would this look like. Now all of a sudden we, in a year from now, would have those pictures, those artist renderings, those things that would bring a campus like a technical center on the east side of town to life. The other piece that I always appreciated, I know that our CFO and Budget and Finance Department appreciate as well, you know, the cost of living continues to go up. We've heard it as we've helped try to provide for our educators and our employees, but the cost of educating students continues to rise as well. So trying to keep that FEFP formula moving in those directions is really important. Your safety work this year, specifically surrounding a $2.5 million allotment that allowed us to move forward with open gate technology. As you'll see on your board agenda of this coming Tuesday night, we're going to be making those final purchases so that all of our schools can have that technology within their room. We're coming back to make sure that Safe Schools allocation, especially as we move into this new area of additional threat assessment work, which Mr. Newland has been talking, and we'll have an executive session talk more about it. There's a lot of work still on the aspect of school safety, glass technology, and other things that we still need to do, and we need to have a fair seat at the table. So excited about the big areas, teacher certification, looking at retirements, finding ways to get people back sooner if we can, and then really just trying to take the opportunity to let them not forget that we are still in the midst of a recovery. Last week you had a huge presentation on the recovery from Hurricane Ian. We're not done yet. And just a reminder, and not really asking for dollars this time around, but some extension of some policies that they suspended for us briefly, that ability to not have 7 contractors working on one home is the best way I could describe it, right? We had a limit as to how much we could contract with any one contractor. So as we were doing something on an expansive roof while doing the interior of the school, we had to have 3 to 4 different contractors, never mind all the trades, present. By getting this extension and that ability to expand the amount of money we could spend with a single person, that has provided us an opportunity to move faster than some other districts have moved in the state of Florida recovering from the hurricane. Don't know that we would need a lot of that opportunity, but if we ran into a project or something that we needed to continue to finish and this would help us, it'd be nice to have that 1-year extension to move forward. So appreciate the hard work that all of you put in to get to this point. Now very interested in your discussion as to what refinement and other things we can bring to the process so we have final documents to take to Tallahassee.
Okay. Board members, any questions or comments? We'll start with Ms. Patrica. She caught my eye first with her pink highlights in her hair for breast cancer.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I appreciate it. My first question is for the after-school care. It's set, where is it? What number is it?
Second under safety.
The first one under safety.
Okay, so it says to expand upon the success. If I recall correctly, and I might be wrong about this, we had grant money to expand after-school care last year. I know, Dr. Bernier, you've done a lot to expand after-school opportunities for kids, but the words expand upon success implies to me that we've had some success and that we have the data to prove that success. Because if I'm a legislator, that's the first question I'm asking. Go ahead.
Sorry, my apologies. I thought you had reached the question mark and you had not. My apologies. I think we are expanding on two forms of success that were provided last year. One was we got a very specific allocation of $250,000 from the legislature in order to do some of the work. So we're expanding on that success, asking for that same round of success again. And last year, when I came on board, we did not have before and after school programs at each one of our elementary schools. They just weren't there. This year, with the help of our amazing principals, because I don't do this by myself, there's some really amazing people out there in the community that do tremendous work in our educational community, and our executive directors of elementary, they determined not only to have before and after school programs at each one of our elementaries, but they decided on a base fee so that they would be identical across the board, and they worked at your, I believe it was at your direction, or at least some influence from all of you, regarding doing something a little special for the teachers that are there, who then spend extra hours with their children, so that so there could be a small break for employees who have childcare needs at the school that they work at. We need to move into middle school, especially with middle school making a shift, particularly in 2026. We need to be prepared to look at what we can do to help middle school. So I think the other piece of the success is also having programs at each one of our schools. We can demonstrate where we were in terms of the numbers, and I'm sure Angel's taking notes. Sorry, Mr. Gomez is taking notes.
Yep.
But we can also look at where we were in terms of number of programs, where we are now, and how they're both before and after school.
And is there a possibility that that might be associated with decreased behavioral issues in those schools by those children? Like, I just, the deeper dive we can take into the data? Because if I'm going to say I gave you $250 last year, where's the proof it worked?
Well, the proof it's worked is that we have the programs. Until we get through an entire year with the programs in place, we don't have those measures. But I can tell you that students in school are not out in their communities doing other things that aren't as productive.
Right.
So just solely that alone, knowing that we have students in a supervised environment where they have a caring and loving person looking over them until their most caring and loving persons can come pick them up, is one aspect. We know we're making an impact that way already. Additionally, there are behavior trackers within our programs to look at those students enrolled, look at their behavior, look at their test scores, look at their reading and writing, those types of issues. But we won't have that information until we go through a whole year of doing the program and then get the results sometime next fall.
Okay, very good. And then my next comment is really more of a comment than a question. A little disappointed on the deregulation front. I like to be a leader as opposed to a follower, and it feels like we're just going to sit back and wait and see what everybody else does and then sort of jump on the bandwagon with regard to whatever impacts Lee County the most. And the way this is worded, this all public schools to have the same statutory flexibility. Since I landed on this board 7 years ago, I've wanted the same statutory flexibility as charter schools, and that doesn't feel obvious in this. So for example, what I hear from staff is that it's really, really difficult. It's a stretch for our resources when a charter school does not provide mental health services to their students, and we're never going to turn a child away for that. No. So we bring them in and we provide those mental health services with the FEFP for our existing students. You know, like, that's a big deal. Another big deal is, I know that a charter school can require either a certain number of volunteer hours from a parent, or they pay a certain amount of money. That's not something that we can do because slavery was outlawed a long time ago, and that is considered slavery. To make a parent go in and volunteer at a school, that could be considered involuntary servitude. So I think I'd like to see more specifics there to begin with, but I might be the only one on that. And then my last one is a comment to the board. I can't go next week. I think I told the chair when the date was changed, I had a previously scheduled conference that I have to attend, so I know you guys are going to rock it up there, but I just wanted you to know why I'm not there. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Morgan?
Yeah, so my question has to do with the $2.5 million for the new Career and Tech Education College. First of all, what is the basis for the career clusters that were chosen? And secondly, why is culinary not included?
Well, I can, through the chair?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So the the CTE group got together, and they actually are the ones who came up with the, based on need and what they thought will be good programming for that, and we're talking about the annex, right?
Yeah.
Yes. And that's what I took as their expert advice. With that said, I could bring that up back to why isn't culinary part of it, and see how maybe if it's doable to include it.
But the reason I ask is does the CTE group include local businesses, or is it just?
No, it's yeah.
Each one of our
Yeah.
CTEs has councils that help inform them. They have specific councils at each one of the schools, and then they report to a larger district-wide council, which includes industry members and other people. I would say that probably the reason why culinary, and I would just have to beg my forgiveness, your forgiveness if I'm wrong. In an annex type situation, that level of investment in an annex to create a culinary kitchen probably would come in a later phase as the real building is built. In an annex, that probably wouldn't happen for culinary, because you're really talking about a very small footprint initially. Probably more classroom space, things that can be taught within a classroom with minimal laboratory, but enough laboratory to support the outcome.
Okay, and the reason I ask is because we know that there are, for example, and I'm not going to remember, group up in Charlotte, the culinary company. CBE. Cheney Brothers, thank you. Cheney Brothers has long expressed an interest in supporting a culinary site and thinking longer term. And one of the things they've talked about is you give us a box and we will put the instructors and the equipment and everything else in the box. And so I'm just, okay, so we're really talking about then a two-phased approach to this thing. We're really not talking about the big picture about what the opportunities are for the district to partner with local business groups to create academies that support their particular industry at that site. I mean, is that correct?
I think, Ms. Morgan, I think we don't have a site yet, so it's hard to put which chicken or egg do you put in front of the other. But I get your question. There has been ongoing conversation both in Cape Coral and at Fort Myers Technical College with the community as to see how they would like programming to expand, what we need, how we need to stay at the workforce. Additionally, the Cape Coral Chamber of Commerce has asked for a meeting with ourselves and our instructors so that they could also help align to understand what we could bring better programming to the Cape or additional programming to the Cape. And what we've expanded is if we're going to do that with the Cape Coral Chamber, we need to do it with the Greater Fort Myers Chamber. We need to go out to East Lehigh and talk with the East Lehigh Chamber of Commerce. We have work to do in terms of making sure that the community is helping, and more importantly, what our people want to be, the product to be employed, that we are producing that product on their behalf.
So then my question becomes, what is the 2.5 million for? We don't have property, and we have, what is our, what are we,
We actually do have some pieces of property that could be considered if $2.5 million was provided us to do those architectural drawings and really determine what it would need to be. That process would then begin the drive of community input and saying, okay, now that we have the money and we can actually design something to be built, what would you like it to be? There could be another ask a year from now, specifically asking with the money we've set aside in the capital plan for this, it's approximately $40 million, if I'm not mistaken. And there was an idea that the community would raise the other half, but we really have to get into a process. This is just that initial stage of what could it look like, where would it fit, how would it fit on a piece of campus, and then from there, start engaging to say, how do we create, I don't know, dare I say, the technical college of the future,
right,
that meets things like cybersecurity and industries like neogenomics, which, I mean, until I dug in, didn't really understand what specifically they do. Arthrax, right? There's multiple places and multiple communities looking for talented and skilled workers, and we have to adjust our programming. And I believe the leadership of CTE, as well as the technical the technical college directors are doing that work. It's just a matter of continuing to try to stay at pace, because the careers that are coming out today are coming at such a rate in areas where in the past, we didn't even think that these careers would even exist.
Okay, thank you. And then I have what's my other question? Oh, in addition to what Ms. Patrica was asking about the $500,000 appropriation for the expansion of school activities, I guess what I'm trying to understand is, so we will, if we get this, over a 2-year period, we will have gotten $750,000 in grants to expand programs. And then what? How are we going to, we're creating programs. Does nobody ask how you're going to fund these programs going forward? I mean, so you prove that, as Ms. Patrica asked, you provide evidence that you are successful. Do we go back every year to the legislature and say, okay, so this is successful, we don't have the money in our budget, but we're just going to keep asking every year?
The short answer to that question is no. The viability of the before and after school programs at our elementary schools are based upon a fee base, and they are self-sustaining. The idea of expanding has to recur around one of two things at the elementary programs. We would have to increase the fee in order to then, for parents, or we have to increase enrollment. Increasing enrollment is always tethered to whether we have enough individuals who want to work after school, which is why in the work with the collaboratory and the large grant that the Florida Gulf Coast University received, we are working on a middle school program and currently piloting a project with a YMCA over at Fort Myers Middle, and they are actually running the after school program for us. The teachers can hire in to become YMCA employees and run a chess club a couple days a week, a drama club a couple days a week. So but the elementary school programs, now that we had the startup money in order to do the planning and pull things together, as well as start to advertise, there are fixed costs that we can use that $250,000 for that gets the word out. But ultimately, it relies upon enough students being enrolled, enough fee being collected, and therefore the program becomes self-sustaining.
Okay, thank you. So then my last question would be, in the past, what we have done is for each of these, we've had a page that we can supply to the staff that lays out in detail what you just said, for example, the context of all of this, so that it's apparent.
Gomez, do you want to talk about the one-pagers that you've been working on?
Absolutely.
One-pagers also, sir, the additional one-pagers also relate.
Supporter of Cape Coral Technical College and the trades. I'm going to be direct on this one, though. Let's see, we have $2 million, but, and they're going to have this question, legislators, where are we at right now? I mean, the first time I'm hearing right now is the 2025 year.
No longer broadcasting on YouTube either. We have IT looking into the issue. That is not related to the cable fiber cut that we were made aware of earlier. The recommendation from the team is to take a brief break and see if we're able to get back up. If not, then we can just continue to record and post it when we are open. So I leave it up to you.
Okay, thank you. I think we should probably take like a 10-minute recess and see where we're at that time.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
you for asking.
What?
Thank you for checking on me.
All right, it's 1:08 and we are back live on air. However, we may not just continue being live on air. We're having some issues, but the whole meeting will be taped and uploaded after the meeting if it does go off the air. So just wanted the public to be aware of that might be watching. Would you like to continue? Yes, Mr. Fisher.
If I may continue, I think, did you finish, Dr. Bernier? And
Yes, sir, I believe that I did. I let you know that we would be getting you more information regarding the Cape Coral Technical Campus, where it stands, and making sure that other people also understand that one of the reasons why Cape Coral Tech's expansion has been delayed was due to the placement of Hector Caffaretto's temporary campus.
thank you, Dr. Bernier, and that was part of it, also making sure that the public was aware of this, so, because there's been a little bit of confusion. I appreciate that. Second item, and this is going to deregulation, and this is essentially what Board Member Patrica said. I would like to have more specificity. I get that we can't necessarily have it that specific at the moment, but I wouldn't like to see it at the bottom, I'll tell you that. I think that's probably going to be the #1 issue during this session. I think that's going to be huge. And, you know, alluding to being leaders, we have a very strong legislative delegation in this area that is leaders and that got it done a lot last year. So I think, you know, we don't want to forget that part either. So, I mean, I think with our relationships with them, they will be able to lead on some of these things, and I appreciate that. So I don't want that to fall by the wayside. So, and I get there's a lot of things out there, but I would like, as Ms. Patrica said, to make this a little bit more specific at least, and definitely I would like to see it at the bottom. So, because it's literally the last thing it looks like on there. Last thing for me is under safety and security. Appropriation for the fencing and enhancing safety. I know we can't obviously go into a whole lot of specifics right now because of security. I'd like some more information on this school district mobile disaster leadership response vehicle, because right now I don't know what that is, and I can't support something right now if I don't know what it truly purpose is and what it is. So those are my comments at the moment. Thank you.
Ms. Giovanelli.
So that was my notes and I was trying to see what the SDMDLR, even what that would be, if you just, to try to shorten it up, versus school district mobile disaster leadership vehicle, response vehicle. I think I missed a word. So yeah, it's a little long. So I was curious if other districts have that. You mentioned that they did, and what that looks like. Is that an RV? What is that? Because I would need more details on that as well. I'm thinking RV or a trailer or something. I don't know. Or I'm thinking, is it a bus? What is that? So all things went through my head about that. And then my other question is regarding the deregulation. Was that a recommendation of our lobbyist to make it last, not make it a little generic, make it less important looking? Because you mentioned that everybody else is going to be on that same bandwagon, but wouldn't power and numbers be more successful versus sitting back and letting everybody else drive the vehicle? I was trying to figure that what the thought process was exactly. Thank you.
As to the first part, I can answer some of the first part. We'll get you more information. The idea behind the mobile disaster, as it was explained to me, was the idea that it could be used in environments post-disaster, such as what we experienced with Hurricane Ian, where we did not have an ability to meet. We had to crowd into the Emergency Operations Center. We really have a seat at the Emergency Operations Center during emergencies. We actually worked from the cafeteria. This would give us an area to work from with connectivity and air conditioning with the executive team so that we could be planning. We worked here. That's one aspect, but the other aspect of it is in response to other emergencies, whether they be bottled water crises, which occurred prior to Hurricane Ian, where we had to move all those water bottles to our school buildings in order to keep them open due to a water main break. It also would work in the worst case scenarios surrounding a tragedy at a particular school building. It would give the district a mobile command site, a place for board members to report to, and to have a place to be a part of the process and then work from there. It was a recommendation that came from David Newland, based upon some of the other things, I'm sorry, Chief Newland, based upon some of the other school districts and what they have in their apparent need to respond to an emergency. As to the second question, I'll let Mr. Gomez take that.
In regards to the second question, yes, this was in conversation with our lobbyist, that as part of our legislative program to keep this statement on the regulations broad enough and more like an umbrella statement, and then create a one-pager that actually has those specific, the regulations that we're trying to push forward.
Yeah, I just like that. Each legislator will get a one-pager for each of these, including the deregulation. So it won't be just like one sentence. Matter of fact, whether it's at the end or not, I don't think really, they don't read these too closely, I'll be honest with you. It is important though, and especially when we're competing with charter schools for students. So it sort of equalizes the playing field somewhat. I think that's the whole purpose statewide for wanting some deregulation, just to sort of even things out a little bit. So just so, at least that's how it was explained to me. So if, Mr. Gomez, if you could actually get that one page out a little bit sooner, maybe make that a priority so we all could look at it. I think that'd make all of us feel a little bit better. Ms. Jordan?
Yes, I was up at the FSBA legislative, and I know Dr. McDougall was there as well, and a lot of the concerns were regarding dereg. I mean, there was a lot of conversation on that, and different districts putting in, because I know that the state, as you said, the school board superintendents, the superintendents as well as FSBA, they're definitely working together to make this all happen. I haven't received that list, so as soon as we get that, I'll make sure that all of you have everything that was spoke about as soon as they put that all together. But a lot of that was state, all across the board in the state. We're all fighting for the same things pretty much. But then again, all the districts are going to have their one-pagers that will be put together so that they can hand out as well. So we'll be full force, it'll be everybody combined. We just need to figure out what we are going to put on ours. But I will send you what, as soon as I get that, I'll make sure that you all have that as well. And then I also, with the CTE, I have to agree with Ms. Morgan. I think that hospitality is the second largest employment in Lee County. And that's something that we really should look at, hospitality/culinary. And we do have one in at Fort Myers, we do have one in the Cape area. So that would really behoove us to have one in the East, because of the fact that we're always there. And I sit on some of these committees with the CTE advisory boards, and health, of course, is one of our biggest ones. Construction, all makes sense. I think that we absolutely should have hospitality, not because I'm in it, but because that's who we are. And because we have manufacturing. Where is all the manufacturing in Lee County? And what does that even look like? So I would definitely be in favor of helping that one out. And the van part, thank you for that, because I was trying to visualize that as far as a command station and driving up and popping up tents and having all that, because the fact that I understand what Dr. B was saying, because I was at that command center with them during the hurricane, and it is hard to have when everybody else is in there and you need your own space. So for something like that, I think that is a great idea. And what else? And the expansion for aftercare, I think, is great, and I think we're really being successful at Fort Myers Middle School with the kids having some place to go, and they're not just roaming around the street. So that's been a real blessing. And if we could do that in more schools, that would be even better, to partnerships up with other, as he said, YMCA or different organizations to help that happen. But I do have a question with that, because I know we did go to a flat fee of $50 across the board for everyone. And I don't know if that, we can maybe have I don't know if that's part of this, but if we are advertising that it's $10 a day or $50 a week, but we only take $50 a week, we need to really make sure, what are we doing with the aftercare? And how are we being successful? I understand that they need the money to run programs, but we need to make sure that we are providing a service for the families. And that's all I have to say.
Okay. Mr. Fisher?
Sorry, and some follow-up. I realized I forgot a few things after we had the break, so, oops, sorry about that, just following up, the mic wasn't on. Real quick, I don't know if on the Cape Coral Technical College, one thing I wanted to say is maybe clean up the language where we put, if it's a phase 2, maybe put that in the beginning, just to show there's a progression right there. Going down to deregulation, the other thing I was thinking, and Board Member Patrica brought this up, she was talking about charter schools, but I mean, obviously with the passage of HB1, we're all in competition right now, and I think the focus, Dr. Bernier, I believe, had mentioned this a couple of meetings ago, we're not only competing with charter schools, we're competing with private schools, so let's see if we can have some of the same tools that the private schools have if we're going to compete in a market like that. So that's all I had. Oh, and for where we put it was not necessarily for they read, but to show it's important to us, show the priority. That's what I meant, not necessarily the reading order, but thank you.
Ms. Patrica?
Somebody mentioned this to me, and so I just feel like I have to say it out loud. With Hodges closing, I know it's not possible to pick that building up and put it out east, but is it possible to look at the cost of providing transportation? Like, acquiring that building because it's already there, I would think would be cheaper than building it from nothing, and then having a central transportation hub somewhere in the east where we could use our school buses to bring them there at varied times throughout the day. Just do a cost-benefit analysis of that versus building new. Again, somebody brought it to my attention, so I felt the need to mention it. Thank you.
Dr. Bernier, do you have any?
If that's the will of the board, we certainly can take a look at what it would take to bus people in. That has not been really the direction that's been provided in the historical record, but I will tell you that you have a superintendent who, when found out that Hodges was closing, has asked our real property division, under the direction of the planning director, Mr. Malloy, to Dr. Malloy, to make sure that we're at least examining the purchasing and what they're going to be asking for it, because our technical colleges, especially Fort Myers Tech, could potentially use a new home, and it could be used as expansion. Those are all very much ideas, not plans. I want to make sure we're very clear to a community on the day we're not sure if we're actually streaming or not. I want to make it sure we're very clear. I asked Dr. Malloy to just look into what the cost of those buildings would be.
Thank you. Any other comments on this? All right. Thank you, Mr. Gomez.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Next, we'll be having Dr. I don't know if that's me or not, Dr. Adam Malloy, Director of Planning and Growth. Dr. Bernier, would you like to say something about the proximity, just enter?
As we move forward with proximity, long meeting with transportation today, not yet ready to make announcements, but in the next week or two, you'll see some movement regarding trying to utilize community resources and logistical planning and transportation in some of our business, members of our business community, being more helpful to an examination of our transportation procedures. I know transportation and the elementary proximity plan was never going to be the perfect solution. We said that multiple times, that elementary would be the start. Middle school has to be the next piece. And then eventually, if the board has a desire to, we may have to look into our high school proximity and how we get our kids to high school as well. We are a bigger system. We transport more than 60,000 kids every single day. There's a lot of miles and a lot of buses, and we are still down bus drivers, and we are still looking for temporary solutions like we look for with university tutors to see whether we can find members to drive our school buses. One of the ways we can go about this is creating school buildings and proximity zones that are served by students. The schools serve the students more nearer to their location, hence the term proximity. The schools are within proximity of the families and community it serves, cutting down on the number of miles and the number of trips that need to be done throughout our community. Again, under the old system, You had 3 zones. If you lived in Zone 2, you could pick from Zone 1, 2, and 3, and we drove you to each. If you were in 1, you could only pick from 2. If you were in 3, you could only pick from 2. So it was a convoluted system that people couldn't clearly understand, overcrowding our school buildings and taxing our resources when it comes to transportation. The next legitimate step would be to look at middle school proximity going into next year, again attempting to do what you in your leadership did with the elementary, which was to clip 15,000 miles off of the elementary routes alone. That is resulting in some better on-time percentage in the morning session of our middle schools in the charts that you've been provided. There's still amount of work still needs to be done with transportation, but the same thing is to continue to move down a process by which we eliminate trips, eliminate miles, and we free up buses and routes in order to be doing the work of getting our children to school on time. Dr. Malloy.
Thank you, Dr. Bernier. Good afternoon. It's a privilege to represent our team in operations and today present the draft proximity plan for middle schools slated for implementation in the upcoming 2024-2025 school year. The technical and procedural details outlined in the following slides align with the execution of the elementary proximity project that was implemented at the start of this school year. While recognizing that this redesign isn't a standalone solution, it is a pivotal continuation of our efforts to improve the school district's ability to ensure timely arrivals and departures for our students. The agenda addresses key aspects of our discussion. This includes the project focus, delving into the technical details of attendance zones and applied methodology, examining existing transportation options and the extent of district transportation responsibility, proposing new middle school zones along with corresponding school choices, outlining procedures for continuation, ESE, and application programs. We will also present our communication plan for the upcoming changes and conclude with a review of critical tasks essential for successful implementation. The technical project work, or MAP methodology, primarily aimed at decreasing the size of the attendance zones and the school district's transportation responsibility through the use of GIS study areas. The objective wasn't solely to minimize bus route lengths and ride times, but also to create attendance zones capable of accommodating the anticipated student growth over the next decade. These maps were developed in partnership with Davis Demographics and adhere to the principles established in the previous year's elementary technical map work, which was implemented in the current school year. Slide 4 illustrates our existing student assignment map, indicating the number of available school choices within each geographic subzone. Currently, our families have an average of 5.3 middle school options. The district is responsible for providing transportation to any school within the selected subzone or the adjacent subzone. To provide a personal perspective, as my son goes to middle school next year, our current system allows us, or rather my wife, to rank 5 schools. The furthest middle school within our current options is 13.5 miles away from our home. Notably, the average transportation coverage for the school district in the current system is 154 square miles. Families residing in subzone 2, for instance, are required to rank all subzones within their broader geographic area, east, south, and west. The subsequent 2 slides detail the technical mapping undertaken to address efficiency concerns within our current system. Our team first developed a 1-to-1 boundary map, intending to reduce the number of choices for families from 5.3 to 1. However, it's crucial to note that this approach, while familiar to those outside of Lee County, is not recommended. The level of displacement and necessary reassignment to meet capacity needs is a significant drawback. Additionally, the 1-to-1 map does not respect historical considerations dating back to the 1964 Blaylock case and the unitary status awarded in 1999. Despite not being recommended for implementation, the 1-to-1 boundary map work was essential for us to establish the foundation for the smaller choice zones proposed to be activated next year for incoming 6th grade students. This slide presents the proposed proximity map for middle schools, scheduled for implementation next year. Notably, the number of school choices is streamlined, reducing the number of choices from 5.3 to 2.2. The average square miles covered by district-provided transportation is set at 87, approximately half of the current mileage. The recommended attendance zones adopt a double alphabet approach, ranging from AA to JJ, with the exclusion of II due to the potential confusion with capital I and lowercase l. These 9 attendance zones have been meticulously mapped to accommodate student growth and account for the addition of future schools. If it's unclear which schools belong to each zone, the following slide will provide specific details on school assignments within each one of the proposed proximity zones. This slide details the specific schools included in each of the proximity zones. For instance, assuming the plan is activated, if you reside in middle school proximity zone GG and are entering 6th grade next year, your options would be limited to Bonita Springs and Three Oaks Middle Schools, with the district providing transportation solely to these 2 schools for GG families. It's important to note certain adjustments, such as aligning North Fort Myers East to State Road 31 with middle schools in North Fort Myers. Additionally, the Alva School is treated in a 1-to-1 manner due to its significant geographic distance from other middle schools. We do have future plans for a middle school in that zone, RR, and upon completion, Zone DD will extend southward to support both schools. These graphics feature 2 case studies illustrating the potential impact of the proposed middle school zones on the district's transportation responsibility. It's important to note that each dot on the maps represents a Lee County middle school student. On the left map, you can see all the students attending Harns Marsh Middle School overlaid on the new proposed proximity plan zones. On the right map, a similar representation is shown for students attending Challenger Middle School. Notably, these maps highlight the extensive spread of students across both Lehigh Acres and Cape Coral. The overlay of the proximity zone serves to demonstrate that if approved, only students residing in zone JJ or BB would have access to these 2 middle schools. These maps effectively showcase the reduction in spatial distance between students and their respective schools. Moving on to the implementation phase. Both the rollout and associated procedures align with the principles established in the elementary proximity plan. The proposed middle school zones are scheduled to take effect in the 2024-2025 school year, impacting incoming 6th grade students, new middle school students to the district, and rising middle school students residing outside of their current school's proximity zone who require transportation. Slide 10 offers a comparison of displacement numbers, representing students currently attending schools, middle schools, outside of the proposed zones, between elementary schools last year and middle schools this year. While the absolute count of displaced students is lower for middle schools, this can be attributed to the larger size and fewer number of middle schools, the displacement percentage remains roughly consistent. These numbers serve as a crucial foundation for our communication plan, enabling us to effectively target and reach out to students who need to take action if they wish to continue attending their current school. It is our team's hope that if this is approved in November, we will have more time to effectively communicate the system change and necessary actions that parents need to take. Displaced students residing outside their current school's proximity zone will have the option to continue to attend their current school, but district transportation will not be provided. This mirrors the strategy employed with elementary schools last year, where the new zones were promptly activated for transportation. To facilitate this process, there will be a continuation enrollment window preceding the new middle school lottery. During this period, families can choose to stay out of zone, thereby waiving transportation, or opt to enter the new middle school proximity zone. Families residing outside their new proximity zone will have the option of a sibling preference. To illustrate, a rising 6th grader, let's say the younger sibling, living beyond the proposed attendance zones could utilize a sibling preference to align with a rising 7th grader, the older sibling. It's important to note that district transportation will only be provided if the current school is within the new middle school proximity zones. Self-contained ESE programs. Students with disabilities will maintain current enrollment and district transportation. This approach mirrors what was taken last year with elementary school. The middle school proximity plan will not affect programs and offerings of individual schools. We currently have 7 total arts application programs, and those will persist at their current sites. It's crucial to emphasize that transportation will only be provided if the school is within the student's middle school proximity zone. The standard reservation of seats and application process will remain unchanged. In other words, families can apply for an arts application program, but transportation will only be provided within the designated zone. I thought it would be valuable to quickly assess the arts offerings in our middle schools. With a total of 21 middle schools in the district, including Sanibel, here's a breakdown. All 21 schools offer band and visual arts. 15 have chorus programs, 10 provide dance programs, 12 offer drama, and 10 feature orchestras. This comprehensive array of arts programs demonstrates significant progress towards an Arts for All approach, surpassing the previous model of only 3 schools providing a comprehensive arts education. Now let's delve into the core components of the communication plan. On the left, you'll find the proximity what, and on the right, the communication how. Reflecting on last year's success, where about 9,600 out of 12,000 displaced families took action by either continuing at their school, waiving transportation, or participating in the new proximity lottery, this campaign aims to build on those achievements. The approach involves employing both central and school site strategies to disseminate information in multiple languages to our stakeholders. A special acknowledgement goes to the communications team for their dedicated efforts, prioritizing the system change and making it a goal to reach every stakeholder in the system. I eagerly anticipate the enhancements and new ideas that they will bring to the table this year. Details regarding the extent of engagement for middle school proximity can be found on slide 17. It's worth noting that several lessons learned from last year's condensed timetable will be applied more extensively. The goal is not to maintain the level of connection with stakeholders, but also to increase the essential touch points for facilitating the system change. The critical tasks and timeline for the middle school proximity plan are outlined for your review. We are set to reconvene on November 1st, and the final plan for student assignment, where the middle school proximity plan resides, is scheduled for November 21st. Pending approval, this will trigger the initiation of the communications campaign and preparations for the continuation window and middle school lottery. I appreciate this opportunity and would now like to pass the floor to the superintendent and the board for further discussion.
So I'd like to thank Dr. Malloy and members of his team who are present today, who do the hard work here, the hard lift of looking at all the data, of making sure the demographic data works, and then having the difficult responsibility of drawing lines and making some determinations as to where young people will continue to their career. In the past, we've always offered an option for those individuals who are aligned to a school to continue to operate within a school. That continued offer will still come to them. So if they have a legacy or a connection prior to the school, they will continue to be allowed to remain in that school if they so choose. We used to use a term, but we've stopped using that term. So at this time, I know there have to be questions, both for me and for Dr. Malloy. Happy to continue to answer questions as it revolves around proximity, and hopefully get enough direction today that we can begin the process of a greater engagement with our community, with town halls and other things beginning in just a few short weeks, if not next week.
Okay. Questions or comments? Mr. Fisher?
Just a brief technical one. First of all, thank you, Dr. Malloy, for your hard work on this. I really do appreciate that. Is there a way we can get, with Davis Demographics, access to a GIS map with the overlay so we can see the specific boundaries?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
I communicated with Chief of Staff Ramirez today to set up a timeline to get that link provided.
Awesome. Thank you.
Any other questions, or Ms. Patrica?
Thank you. You know, I think you're a rock star, and you're able to take really, really complicated information and help me to understand it. So I appreciate that. My question is, on the slide you showed middle school arts, I'm looking at that and I'm sort of comparing it to slide 7, wondering whether there will be chorus, dance, drama, orchestra available in each of these newly drawn proximity zones.
Correct. That's something that our team is taking a look at, and what each school that is lacking a certain program needs to do to acquire that. Talked with Mr. Tomaszewski a number of times about what we can do to move that forward. But this slide in the offerings was actually, a learning experience for me as well. This was something that he provided to see that the district was this far along in terms of their arts offerings.
Great. That's it. That's all I have. Thank you.
Any other questions? Ms. Jordan?
Dr. Malloy, thank you. I've seen the one that you presented to EDAC, and then this one is more broad. So thank you for this. But my question is on, I think it's 9. I'm not sure what number it is. The immediate impact, it just says incoming 7th grade. It really is going to impact all of them, 7th graders as well, and 8th, anyone that's in the school. It's going to affect all the students if they have to move. It's not just the 6th graders that it will impact.
Rising middle school student. It's right there.
Living outside of the, the rising to me is them are coming in.
No, it's
Not that they're
rising
already
from
in.
6th.
Forget what I just said to you. I just want to make sure all is all. Okay, thank you.
If I can interrupt, I think it's worth stating for the record, I think it's really, if it confused a board member, I think it's really important for the community to hear the same thing. And I'm not saying that Mrs. Jordan was confused, just that it's a lot to take in, and we're taking it in after previous presentations about other items. So when proximity is implemented, clearly there's an impact to incoming 6th grade students, right? Clearly a 5th grader going to 6th grade, just like our incoming kindergartners last year, and there will be a push in a communications tool that works very hard to get those people to respond. And Dr. Malloy will probably spend countless midnight hours, looking at percentages and then going back and helping schools continue to reach their 6th grade populations. It will affect all new middle school students coming to the district. So if you're coming in, they will have to make a choice based upon these new proximity zones. It will also impact rising middle school students, and what we mean by that are those 6th graders going to 7th, those 7th graders going to 8th. So that's probably good information we go out to the community to maybe simplify this a little bit. So the rising 7th and 8th graders living outside of their current school's proximity attendance zone and needing transportation. So when the maps are changed, if I'm a 7th or an 8th grader and I live outside of the boundary, I can still continue to go to my middle school, but I still need at that point to provide my own transportation. Thank you for allowing me that point of clarification.
Thank you for that. Also too, and as we all know, when looking at this and how we have put the schools together, for instance, Fort Myers Middle School, Dunbar Middle School, et cetera, that's just two I just threw off the top of my head because that's my area. But you know how the perception is, so how do we, I think that as we go around and we speak, we have to, as Ms. Patrica said, make sure that we have those programs that we offer at all the schools so people don't believe that they're being, now I have to send my child to a school that is not this great. People look at grades, people look at all that stuff, but we want to make sure that people understand that all of our schools are the best, and how do we do that as we're out there and we're promoting this objective, that we're going to do this. We have to make sure that they understand that regardless of what school you go to, you're going to get the best education for your just wanted to put that out there. Thank you.
Ms. Giovanelli first, and then Ms. Patrica.
So, couple things. Is there, because this is something we came across just recently with the elementary proximity, is there going to be an employee/staff preference where they have the ability to pick the school that they want their child to go to, or the one they're working at, or what's accessible, on their way to work or whatever? Is that something we're looking at for middle school?
Yeah, the employee waiver is looking to remain, and certainly as we get this information out there, employees that need to use that waiver, and I believe that the successful completion of the employee waiver was 100%. So they're working with their employees, but it's about getting the employees this information so that they can make that employee waiver. But the employee preference is something we can certainly bring up with student assignment.
Yeah, I think that's really important. Second, no one's talking about K-8. And K-8 scenario, I have a 5th grader and I don't want to leave I want to go to 6th grade at my K-8, but I am out of the proximity technically. How do I stay there and then, you know, because now it's my family. I don't want to leave K-8. I think we need to look at our K-8 schools as a little bit different. And I'm bringing that up because I think it's important, because I know parents would drive out of the zone to go to certain K-8s, and I would like to see all K-8s looked at you know, just a tad bit differently, because it is elementary through middle school. And I don't know exactly what that looks like. I would hope that your insight, Dr. Malloy, would help with that. But maybe there should be maybe a preference, or they turn into magnets, or, you know, with the lottery. I think we just need to look at those a little differently. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Patrica?
So I don't recall at this point in the proximity for elementary planning, did we have an estimate on number of miles saved on buses after implementation?
At this point in the elementary proximity plan, we did not have knowledge of the number of miles saved. This has to move further. It has to get more community input, and only then would we put it into our routing systems and start to look at what miles, because this is, even with Ms. Giovanelli's last point, this could be revised and go through different iterations before we get it to the point where we'd want to plug it into the transportation system, routing system, and see exactly what we're saving.
Okay. All right, I had a question. Some of the schools of the arts had some like audition spots or tryout spots, however you want to do it. Will they maintain those, or they change, or?
Yeah, those will remain. We're not looking to take anything away as it relates to the arts, the application programs. I believe we have 6 arts application and audition programs, and then 1 magnet STEAM, which also has an A and includes the arts there at Lehigh Acres Middle. So out of those 7, those seats will still be reserved. You can still go through the application process. However, if you are not living within the zone, the district will not provide transportation. In essence, it could be viewed as an expansion of access. So we're working with the team to tighten language as it relates to the plan, coming back to you November 1st with a little bit more details on how that could operate. It's a little bit more traditional of access to programs like that. It mimics maybe more other school districts in terms of magnet offerings, but yes, we do currently have 7 that reserve roughly estimated around 50 seats. They don't all use them, but they are available, and those are going to remain.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Jordan.
Sorry, I thought of something else. So just like we have in the elementary school, which I still have, I think is a little bit insane, the kids coming from Tice going all the way out to Alva, which they're in that little zone. Now we're having the North Fort Myers kids going all the way to the Cape again, which I know they already go to Calusa, but now it's the Cape and Diplomat. Can we not keep the North kids together? Or are we gonna just, and I'm gonna go to the Bayshore side, I'm just going there. So, and then we're all the way to the kids that are in Bayshore. At that end, where are they at in this whole, in the map? Are they coming across the river still, or?
No.
Because I can't, so they're, all of the North Myers to 31, they would then be going all the way from 31 to possibly Calusa.
Possibly.
Which is, again, that drive time for those kids are more than, it just seems like those kids, certain kids are getting pushed further than other kids. That's the way it looks, it appears. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention.
This is multiple, sorry, Mrs. Jordan, this is multiple plans coming into action at once. So you're right. So when we look at the way a school district operates, what you're receiving today is some siloed information specifically around proximity. One of the missing pieces to proximity is also looking at a revised 10-year plan that we brought to you once already. We'll bring again, and there is the possibility that the team has been asked to look into some of these situations to see whether expansion to a K-8 model or an additional middle school site Clearly, we have property over near Tice Elementary. Does that fit into building a middle school? Does the data drive that? So there's other pieces to this puzzle. This is like, I don't know, building a puzzle, but only having some of the pieces so far.
No, and I understand that, and thank you for saying that. When I look at this, I do see, just like we did with the kids in the Tice area, some of them are going all the way out to Alva. So I think that when we're looking at clustering kids, whether it's our 10-year or down the, year or two later, we still have to look, who are these kids that we're shipping out or sending out to, how long are they on that bus? As we're trying to shorten up the bus ride, the ridership. So I still felt like I needed to say that. Thank you.
I know personally, I had several parents from Bayshore call me wanting to go to the North Fort Myers Academy of the Arts, and they're just overjoyed that this allows them to do that rather than having to go all the way across the river to one of the other schools. That was just their first choice. How it works out, I don't know. But that's just wanted to, Ms. Giovanelli, did you have a?
Yeah, real quick. So, communications and the understanding is so important. So my my question is, will you present this at this, to EDAC and get their input before moving on to, I know it's a work in progress, right? But, I think we need to carry everybody along every step of the way, even if this is not exactly how it pans out in the very end, obviously. But I think it's so intricate, so that's all it's just more of a statement.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
And to your point, this originally was scheduled on 9/27. We moved it to the 11th, and now we can really hit all of those different advisory committees. So I was on for EDAC this past Monday, but really couldn't show them the details until we presented today. I will be back, which makes for all fall 2023 with EDAC in November as well, to talk about the plan itself. But no, this is the start. We get the zones out, and we really start engaging as much as we can. Principals, following you guys receiving the public facing map, or what we're calling the GIS map, principals will also receive and then be able to provide feedback.
Thank you. Thank you for your work on this.
All right. Seeing no other questions, thank you. We will move on to our next item on our agenda, which Mr. Savage gets to come back and join us again. Would you like to give him another intro or on the topic?
I would. I want to ensure that he's coming back to do strategic plan update first, given Dr. Savage has many opportunities today. I can't thank you enough for the work that we did this past spring. This past spring, there was a refresh of the strategic plan, looking at what we felt were the most important needs, integrating some of former leadership's Big Five and other things into that plan so that we would have one plan moving forward, in a sense, a scorecard for the school district, a set of goals, key performance indicators, and then public-facing scorecards as the data comes out, setting the baselines, and then pushing for incremental and positive progress in all of our categories as we break down students and their student learning, not just into proficiency levels, but looking at growth and also looking at particular different groups of students, specifically like ELL and ESE students, and making some comparisons as to their achievement. That work is not easy, and the board really dug in on it. I appreciate the cabinet coming to the last several sessions so they could hear the board's dialogue and their work so that we could own it. And I need to recognize Dr. Savage specifically, who has carried the heavy lift of organizing all the chiefs, bringing them all to regular meetings, getting them to move and complete deadlines with all the other work that they have to do. I don't want to paint a picture that my chiefs are not cooperative. They are. But they have very full plates. But they have prioritized this work. And what Dr. Savage has an opportunity also to present today is our process moving forward, where the board will have regular, scheduled opportunities for staff to come before them, no matter who sits here, to hear about the progress of the strategic plan, in a sense, get the temperature reading of the patient and the pulse and the blood pressure each time those presentations are made. The presentation schedule for this year, because we're already into October, will be slightly different, but beginning next year, by your actions, when we finally bring this to you for final approval, you will have a roadmap for consistent and, I would dare say, proper information coming to you at regular intervals to inform this board as to the progress of the district. Dr. Savage has been a huge component in making that work and making today possible. Dr. Savage.
Thank you, Dr. Bernier. And again, good afternoon again, Chairman-persons, Vice Chair Fisher, esteemed board members, and Attorney Dupuy Bruno, Dr. Bernier. So today we come to the final, this has been a process that really, as Dr. Bernier memorialized, really began with your significant work as a board, taking care of reacting to all the accreditation data, many other sources of data, and today we have finally made it all the way to launch date, which was planned back at that time frame, and so it's very exciting to be at this point. That said, we're going to start off with just our agenda, and that is we're going to check back on our implementation timeline, just to, we do that every time, but just to see where we are at within our process. But we'll also remind everyone of the key documents that have been briefed at each one of our meetings leading up to today. And then we will, the probably most important part is what Dr. Bernier was referencing in our report and cadence, which this is the biggest difference between prior plans and this plan, is that this plan is not today's plan. This is a living plan. And the way that you as a board and also the public will understand how it's living is precisely to that cadence that Dr. Bernier pushed for as well. And this is something I want to give credit back to Dr. Bernier. You know, the recommendation through Education Elements, which was pretty consistent with a lot of other districts, was quarterly updates on the strategic plan. Dr. Bernier leaned into the idea of more frequently than that. You know, could we get to monthly? And so that was really what helped to drive that finishing piece. And I think when we get to that at the very end, it's probably the most exciting part of this presentation today that I'm excited to share with you. So with that said, we'll finish then with next steps, which includes that. So just to start with, it's important to remember that while this plan takes us through 2030, that's the Envision 2030, that name has not changed, we are really focused on the next 3 to 5 years with our plan implementation. So to illustrate that, we will have a roadmap that was introduced by Education Elements that highlights the milestones, then we'll go to the milestones after that. So again, just to remember, this road to success is not overnight, but this is what it looks like in terms of the narrowing that occurs from year 1, where we are, all the way to year 5. Year 1 is really all about that alignment, and then we continue to see in year 2 and year 3 that acclimation and refinement until year 4 and 5 really become through that sustainability, making sure that it's really self-sustaining and self-reinforcing, as well as then year 5 really taking that opportunity to re-envision again to say, is this still the right work, or have we as a society changed in some way that the plan no longer quite describes where we should be headed. So this is our 5-year, roadmap. Got that, sorry. Today we enter launch mode. This involves communication both to schools and to our broader community. It requires alignment in our school improvement planning work and the public launch of our scorecard. Those are all elements that get launched today. Communications has developed an operational plan to bring this to our community and schools, but the most important thing is to remember that post-launch, as I've referenced earlier, this is a living, breathing plan. Our intention is to continue to have ongoing monitoring, reflection, and problem solving with all stakeholder groups. So in many ways, today, the plan is just beginning as the work to change the outcomes will be an interplay with all of our stakeholders. We are currently looking at engagement technology that can be a big part of this process as well, to really make it even more living than just those public briefings, to really be able to gain more insight from our stakeholder groups leveraging technology. I want to shift gears and make sure that we review all of the plan artifacts that help us understand where we are today, how we got to where we are, and where we are headed. This is a reminder that we have several public-facing documents that will live on our website as artifacts for the strategic plan. Now, we've gone over each one at a prior board update, so we're not going to redone it and go over them again. But just a reminder that they are how we frame the plan itself and make it accessible to people. So the first, I want to start with the far left, where it talks about our blueprint. Our blueprint, when Education Elements developed this initial structure, it's really the story of how our plan was refreshed. So if there's ever a wondering of how did they arrive at this? How did the board? This is a document that actually memorializes that. It summarizes the key data upon which the different priorities were based, insights that the board members had captured that, and it memorialized also the process itself. The one pager, as you see in the top right corner, that is the face of our plan. It more concisely communicates what we are about, where we want to go as a district, and how we will go about our work in the form of our values. When we move into the scorecard, as Dr. Bernier mentioned earlier, it's all about results and outcomes that take our high expectations and manifest them into tangible targets. The scorecard is how we will hold ourselves accountable. If there is any area I personally struggle with, it sometimes is that scorecard, because my personal preference has always been for a balanced scorecard where the targets are really scientific and defensible. But this is not exactly that. This is a scorecard with world-class ambitions, as I stated the last time. And when our team worked to set those targets, they did so with being world-class as the standard, and so the targets will reflect that. However, this is one opportunity that I want to talk about that I've already kind of mentioned several times about the dynamic nature of the plan, not being a static one. So the newest work product at the end of the presentation that we get to, that I'm very excited about, hopefully that will be a little bit clearer as to how we kind of check in on our targeting, so that if we are way off on our targeting and if we're seeing other leading measures that are indicating that, there is that opportunity for revisions, but it's really based on feedback and based on those results that we're getting. This and as well as systematic engagement that we have planned for our various groups. More to come on that when we get to our cadence of reporting. Now, last time we provided an update. I actually started with the top set of waves, but this time I wanted to go down to the ground level first, and that is to start with the operational and tactical level, because this really is going to be the hardest part of the new plan approach, and it's predominantly work that occurs at the district work level. Again, this is not the board's work, but it is the work of departments, divisions, and central office administration. And this is our operational cultural shift, and it's all about achieving that organizational coherence so that the work of the board, the central office, and the schools becomes aligned around results. Our weekly and monthly work as a district will be evolving in this first year of implementation, and we will not achieve it overnight. But as we are held accountable in our monthly schedule of reporting, it will really force us as an organization to become more disciplined in our way of work. There will be many tough days ahead, but it will be good work, and the cabinet is ready for our operational areas to become tighter among more aligned around outcomes. Now, while you as a board won't be privy to these specific components in the operational segment, it is important for you to be aware of what's happening at that granular level, just so that you are aware of what is going on. And that is that Cabinet will have our monthly update with pertinent data and the related strategies and initiatives to those data. These are staggered based on the schedule that we'll be going over, so this establishes a rhythm and keeps the business issues at the forefront of our meeting. This is also a lot of work that there's still to go in terms of the in-process measures and within cycle outcomes, because ultimately we want to make sure we have leading indicators for all of our critical areas that give our leaders an understanding of how things are trending, so we aren't just waiting on the official update of the annual results. So shifting back up to the 10,000 foot level, the strategic governance and executive level, the reporting that you will get will actually exceed the frequency that's listed here based on the estimates from Education Elements. Now within the suggested cadence, we'll be doing these on a near monthly basis. Here is specifically what the board can expect, and as we talk about next steps we're going to make, this part will really come alive for you. So this is the generic description, but you're going to see a schedule today. All right, so let's go into our next steps so we can go back to our year one so we can see exactly where we are. So these are the areas that have already been accomplished. And then these are the areas that are moving forward. Because even after the launch occurs today, which is you see at the top right, launch, monitor, adapt, that monitor and adapt, those are the living, breathing elements of the plan that really do continue. Oops, I'm sorry. And so the one piece that is in yellow there in the middle, that communicating plan to broader community, that's the communications work that is already underway. I believe Dr. Bernier already has some town halls and things scheduled. We've been meeting with all of the school-based administration, and even teachers have awareness. A lot of these things are already underway. in terms of communicating the plan and so forth moving forward. But that far right box that you see is listed from October to May 24, those are the elements that are going to be the ongoing living part of year one. As I referenced this, communications has developed with the superintendent a strategy around how to leverage the various tools to bring the refreshed strategic plan to the various stakeholder groups. So now this is very operational nature, so we aren't going to get into the weeds with their plan, but suffice it to say that there is the initial lift and then the continued opportunities to engage with stakeholder groups. Irma, the Director of Communications, will be sure to put something in the board weekly that gives you a detailed view of how communications and the superintendent are kicking things off, but it includes things like town halls, school messengers, and videos. All right, now this is the big new shift that takes us to today's launch. This is our anticipated cadence of reporting. We have a monthly strategic plan board update that will occur as a public meeting. Now I'm going to pull the schedule up so we can review each one together. And first we're going to start with what would happen in a typical year, because this is kind of a unique year, not just because of the launch, but also because of the state standard shift where we don't yet have our accountability data for this most past year. And so it is kind of a unique year, but probably an ideal one to be launching this. For that exact reason. So we'll have a different schedule for this year, but I'm going to cover a typical year first, and then we'll back to this year. So we'll leave you with what you can expect for the remainder of this year until we're back on schedule. So I'm going to cover that first. So let's go ahead and shift out of this and go to our strategic plan. Cadence. Okay. So this is our typical year of what you can expect, and it will begin in August because that's when our students come back to school and our teachers come back to school. So that is the beginning of our year on an annual basis. And this starts with the academic achievement outcomes for the prior year. So this is really where, going into the year, you will really have a deep understanding of how our schools performed in all the critical areas that we measure, as well as how all of our schools performed in August. That is that prior year outcome. In September, you'll get the same type of outcome, but it'll be on the operational side. So all of the non-school specific outcomes, so all the department and divisional related outcomes that we're going to be tracking, those will get reported in that. So it's kind of 2 year in a glance. So looking at how we just performed for that entire school year, you get to kick off your year in August and September with those clear understandings to set the table for that for the coming year. In October, we shift to the outcomes for human resources, which is a typical time frame to present those human resource outcomes. And what this really shows us is how our system performed over our summer hiring process and what's kind of the state of our current human resource situation related to those key measures. And so October really becomes a key focal point for human resource outcomes. When we get to November and December, that is when the board has its reorganization, but it's also when we'll hear from the communications outcomes. So this really talks about how the engagement is going and specifically targeting our families, but all relevant leading measures from communications as to how they are trying to engage various stakeholder groups. When we come back in January, we have the mid-year academic outcomes. And so this really will have progress monitoring data at this point, as well as the data that is lagged and reported from the state. So this is when the graduation rate gets released, our college and career acceleration, as well as other Survey 5 outcomes that don't get finalized until those December months. So when you come back in January, you get really a good idea of how the year is going academically, specifically also in those critical measures that you didn't have in the August briefing. In February, we talk about safety and fiscal performance. So starting with safety, safety is also one of those Survey 5 pieces in terms of what's reported to the state. So this is really an opportunity to hear how are people feeling, both students and employees, in terms of the safe learning working environment, as well as decreasing the CESAR incidents that we are tracked and everyone in the state are tracked. And so to ensure that we are trending in the right direction related to crime, violence, and disruption. But away from safety, we also have an important important consideration in fiscal performance. This is really where business cases of how are the various initiatives and critical things that we're funding, how are they performing in terms of impact, so that as we go into the next budget season, which really begins during this time period, we really understand where are we getting the bang for our buck in terms of an impact that we're looking for based on how we're spending our resources. So it's kind of that just-in-time information that works both internally but also highlights to the board level and the public level, so we can tell those data stories, both good and bad. Moving into March, that's when we move into our outcomes for employee engagement. So similar to how Human Resources talks about back in October, that hard data of people we lost, people we recruited, and things such of that nature, when you get to March, it's really that mid-year data that's those leading indicators of, are people feeling valued? Is that speak up, listen up culture actually being implemented? Do employees feel valued? Are they getting the feedback they need? Are they getting the development they need? This is that opportunity to really check in on our employees to ensure that what we aspire to be, how are we doing relative to those types of aspects? So it's really a mid-year human resource type of approach. Moving into April, this is brand new, something we have not done at this level and connected to the strategic plan in this way. So I'm very excited about this. The Student Summit. This is our opportunity to finally recognize students as our sincere partners in the educational process. The board has always really enjoyed the input from having a member at the board dais, having a student representative to hear their unique voice. This is an opportunity to take that up several magnitudes by having students contribute to this summit, to really speak to how effective the school culture is, whether or not they are seeing that student voice, choice, and student ownership of learning that the board elevated as one of their critical KPIs to track. How are we doing related to that? Where can we improve, and to really elevate students as a partner in this educational process? So very excited about April. That culminates in May with an annual governance team strategic plan retreat. And this is not with the intention to redo the strategic plan. That is not the intention. So what you did in those prior two retreats was really to do that refresh. This is an opportunity to look at the plan in totality, to look at a deeper, more reflective lens as a board team, to come together with the superintendent to really look in depth at how the district is performing in all these critical areas, and to have the type of reflective time and activity to see some of the intersectionality of these pieces as well. Because while these are broken down, there's always an interconnection effect, and that particular May meeting allows you to do that. When we move to June and July, at the end of our year, of our typical year, we'll really focus on customer engagement as well as our partnerships, strategic partnerships, and how those things are performing, which is a typical time of the year where we recognize business partners as well as really try to understand how we're doing with our customers in terms of that performance. So that takes us through a full year. Very quickly, to go to the modified schedule so you can see how we'll do for this year. Well, today is obviously our launch plan date, and then in November, because we're going to push human resources back to that next window, so those summer metrics and all those pieces will be compiled. So instead of October, normally you'll actually have the human resources in November, December. January is not just your mid-year academic outcomes, you'll have that, but you'll also have all the 22-23 state released outcomes presented. So you really get to see how we did last year from a results standpoint, as well as we'll have our new graduation rate and college and career acceleration rate as well. Moving into February, we will do outcomes from safety and communications, which we had to push back from the HR side. And so you'll get both of those two metrics. So we'll have our Survey 5 safety data as well as our new communications that Mr. Gomez, who spoke to you earlier, will have a chance to present as well. And then in March, we will do our mid-year operational outcomes and our fiscal performance. That's an opportunity to get, as I mentioned before, some of that fiscal performance piece, as well as because we bypassed the operational outcomes, we'll have a lot of those key metrics as well. This then, for this year and this year only, we'll do an engagement summit. So not just the student, but this really is blending the human resources as well with our students to really dig into engagement and make sure that we are listening to our clients, both the people who work for this organization as well as our students who are both the recipients, but also the people who drive our learning every single day, to allow those two groups to really be elevated. So very excited about that. And then we are back on schedule. So then in May, we land exactly exactly where our typical annual year will come, which is in the annual governance team strategic plan retreat, which we would like to make an annual activity, and now we can transition to the new cadence. Just for the sake of seeing how it's closed out, I included June, July, which is that customer engagement partnerships, as well as in August, as I said, we're back on that 23-24 outcomes, and then the operational outcomes is September, and boom, we continue in that never-ending cycle. So earlier it was mentioned, how when we transition to an elected superintendent, it's a real challenge because right now the superintendent alone is really accountable for that particular piece in this, but this really is all of us. This is the entire governance team, this is the entire district being unified behind a strategic plan that defines what we're focused on, how we're going to go about that work, and this is how we're communicating to our public in a very organized way that is thematic, but also really speaks to every single one of those key metrics being updated at that time. So I wanted to make sure I elevated that because this really is the most important part of the presentation today to ensure that this is really how we intend to live this plan. So I wanted to share that with you today. Before that, I'm going to switch back, I think, to the presentation. And again, we have these artifacts that we can go into with your questions today as well. But that takes us, before I, of course, turn it back to the board, I just want to give the superintendent, I want to defer to him if there's anything that I omitted that he would like to elevate before we have the board discussion.
No, Ken, there's nothing, no, Dr. Savage, there's nothing you didn't cover. I just want to reiterate some of your closing comments to the board. As we've been working with Cabinet this year, we've been having an ongoing discussion surrounding being a disciplined organization. And what has come from that work, from using a specific Kempner-Traeger tool called a SCAN, or a situation analysis, that we've discussed, we first reverse engineered. And it's a fun activity. I would suggest that if you ever have a chance to do it in your line of work or others listening, if you wanted to produce the best customer service possible, sometimes it's fun to design what would be the worst customer service ever. Because by looking at the negative, you begin to realize how positive your organization is and how you don't have to build from the ground up. You just have to build on what we're already working on. The other thing you do is when you create those negative experiences, like saying never answer the phone if you wanted to build the worst customer service program, you begin to pull from experiences that you've had where your email wasn't returned or somebody didn't return your call. So there's value in having people explore some of the negative experiences they've had. The last two cabinet meetings, we've shifted that to the positive. We are down to 4 to 5 key elements of how a disciplined organization like a cabinet should operate. Looking forward to being able to present that to you, but it speaks very specifically about planning and action related to the strategic plan. The cabinet has it. They understand the importance of this plan, so much so that it is affecting conversations as we begin to think about budget. And in November and December, we are going to begin some of our very initial budgetary conversations, because what we want to know is, based upon the strategic plan, what do we need to do? Not based upon how many people I have or how I'd like to add to my specific department. Where do we feel, especially after we get the data in January, we're coming up short, and where should we be recommending to the board how we should invest to make those changes? It seems, right, a couple of retreats at the collaboratory, we built a plan, we put it in a framework. I'm telling you, it's a game changer. And thank you to Dr. Savage again for creating a cadence of reporting as well as the scorecards. And as the data comes out, we will make sure that baseline data is entered, and then we begin to apply the metrics of improvement and report until such time as you revise it again. So excited about where we are and excited what the future can hold related to this work. I'll turn it over to the board for your discussion at this time.
Thank you. Board members, any discussion? Ms. Jordan?
I just want to say thank you, Dr. Savage. This was really a lot of work, and it's really good information, so thank you so much.
Ms. Morgan?
Well, it is an extraordinary amount of work. I am really impressed by the level of your commitment to this and your willingness to do some of the the pushing and the organizing of data, and words like organizational coherence, changing the culture, a disciplined organization. I mean, this is what I've been talking about for a long time. We are a huge organization. We can't operate as independent, independent contractors in our various areas of responsibility. We are all linked, and I've often used the three-legged stool. You know, if any one piece fails, the organization fails. And if you can't see where your piece fits into the whole organization, you don't know, you have no sense of what risk your work is putting to the organization. So, you know, I am thrilled to see this. Thank you. I am so excited to see April with student outcomes. That will be the first proof of this thing working. April, student and staff engagement, plugging that in. I mean, that's just, I wouldn't have thought of that, but that's huge. I mean, that is a big piece that we learned sitting in all of the strategic planning, that we have a real problem in terms of particularly student engagement, but I think also with respect to staff engagement, particularly as you're going through a period of change like this. I'm just, hey, you know, like, I'm done. Thank you. I am just, I can't say it enough.
Thrilled. Thrilled's the word, yeah.
What?
Thrilled.
Thrilled, yeah, thrilled. Thank you.
I'd like to say this is the closest I've seen a government become more like a corporation, the way it should be run. And, you know, as you said before, it's a huge amount of money, our budget, but also a huge amount of responsibility with all the kids. And it's not an easy task. And it did seem before, it's like the very end of the year, oh, look at this, our graduation rates are down, no one knew, you know, type thing. So it's keeping the board abreast and all the different department heads and all the principals and teachers of what actually is happening, pretty much real time almost, is huge. I think it's going to make a great difference. And thank you again for putting it all together and all the work that everybody did, including the board. I think that's going to make a big difference. Is that all? Anyone else? Oh, Ms. Giovanelli.
Just thank you for this work, and I'm excited to see Ms. Morgan excited, because I know that this is something that she's talked about many, many, many times, and so I'm excited to see that. I can't wait till April and see the outcomes, so thank you.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, if
Yes.
I just have one, I really want to highlight, and Dr. B always says this, but I want to make sure we highlight, you know, it really started with your commitment as a group. How you worked in the retreat was evident. You know, not everyone got a chance to see all of it. I was there, I got to watch. Dr. B was a big part of it. So it really, your group collectively, just reacting to this information, it's been really easy to tell that story to others or stakeholder groups I've been working with. And I also just really want to give a special point of privilege to Dr. B as well. When he came on, this was one of the things that was really important to him, was this opportunity to refresh our strategic plan. And his timeline was very ambitious. I remember he said, wait, how soon do you want to do this? But it was essential, because what he understood at that time was how, if the group collectively is committed to the work, that is really what can drive the district. And I think that it was work beyond him, beyond just his own person and beyond any individual board member, but that collective piece. So he really was adamant about this aggressive schedule. I wasn't always sure we were going to make it, and he knows that. But then the last group I just really want to thank, just for my work on this, was the cabinet. So it's probably not evident from this the level of sacrifice that the individual cabinet members will have to make, because they're, as Dr. B mentioned, they're so busy. No one is not doing this type of work because they don't want to or care about it. As you mentioned, those silos, it's true. People they're working as hard as they can, the best that they can, but because we all have to come together, the sacrifice that everyone was willing to do to collectively move this thing forward and accept this public accountability, because now it's there, it's in writing, now it's accountable, and they can't drop their baton. It's adding stress certainly to all of them, and I just want to thank all those groups, because it really is not me. I just got to be the one speaking about it today. Truly, it was a collective effort of everyone, starting with you and with them, and then, of course, all the people who gave their honest opinion through accreditation data, down to students, thousands and thousands of student voices that really helped drive it, as well as our staff. So really, it's a thank you to everyone. So just wanted to close with that. So thank you.
Thank you. All right. Dr. Bernier, would you like to take us into our next segment, the operational millage?
I would like to. Thank you very much, sir. The next presentation, which will include Dr. Savage, is related to a board request for dates certain within 30 days to talk to and provide information regarding the voted operational millage option that is available to a school board within the state of Florida. I will say that our scope was very specific. It was to discuss what is a millage. It was to look at the legal aspects of what a board would need to do to put a millage referendum forward. And then specifically it asked for more information regarding some of the districts that have a millage and what it meant to their vacancy rate as well as salaries. I am here to explain in advance that it is unlikely you will have much information on salaries in today's presentation. That is information that districts hold very tight. We can go out and look at websites, but when we actually look at the websites, what they're reporting are different things, and we want to make sure that when we compare apples to apples that we're actually doing that. So there will need to be a follow-up presentation or a follow-up within the board update that provides you very specific information. It's going to require us calling other HR chiefs across the district, sitting with them and explaining, you know, how has this truly impacted your entry, middle, and upper salary information. At this time, I will turn it over to Dr. Savage, who will lead us through very quickly to, I believe, Dr. Desamore, and then Attorney Dupuy Bruno also has part of the presentation, and then it will come back to me for a landing.
Thank you, Dr. Bernier. Good afternoon again, Chair, Vice Chair, Board members, Dr. B, and Attorney Dupuy Bruno. Per the Board's direction to Dr. Bernier, this is the 30 days time certain response for information on the additional voted operational millage. Let me state first plainly, mostly for the public, but also just remind everyone at the table today, this is not an advocacy presentation. This is strictly an informational presentation that was requested by the Board, so that is what is being presented today. So today's agenda, we're going to first define what the additional millage is and what it is not. And then we will also share the statutory process by which the voted millage is obtained, and based on the Board's direction, we will also share the utilization and impacts the millage is intended to have for boards that choose to bring this option to their communities to utilize, for vote, to utilize this revenue stream. Dr. D?
And we wanted to make sure to give enough background for everybody who may be watching to just talk about even what is millage or what is a mill. And so basically that is the property tax, and that is applied to individual property owners here within the state. So anyone that owns real property, that rate is applied, and it's called a mill because that rate is applied to every $1,000 worth of property value. So our current millage that we have levied currently as a district would be the RLE, or the required local effort, as listed. That required local effort is what's set forward in the Florida Education Finance Program, or FEFP, and that is required by the state in order to get access to any of other state education funding that the state provides. There's the additional discretionary millage, and that is a 0.748. Again, that is listed and allowed by the FEFP program, and we levy that. And then capital millage, so 1.5 mils that is levied specifically for the capital needs of the district. So currently the total millage that the school district levies is 5.43, or that is $5.43 for every $1,000 of real property value. And then there are two possible additional millages that rights that are given to us by or opportunities that are given to us by statute. So two millages that are available via voter referendum, both and both can be used towards district operational costs. One of them, and they're both outlined in statute 1011.73. One of them is a millage that would not exceed 2 years before you would have to go back and ask for additional opportunity if you chose to do so. And then the other is a not to exceed 4-year timeline.
Thank you, Dr. Desmore. So let's delve a little bit further into the statute. 1011.731 is the one that discusses not to exceed 2 years. In order to present this, the board would have to pass a resolution that they adopt at a regular meeting and then direct the county commissioners to call an election of the electors to pass this particular millage. Florida Statute 1011.73 subsection 2 is the one that discusses the 4 years, not to exceed 4 years. Same process, to pass a resolution at a regular meeting and then direct the county commissioners to call for an election. Florida Statute 1011.73 states that you can have the election no more than one 12-month period. We will discuss in terms of the particular timing of that election. In addition, multiple areas in the statute, it makes sure that it is clear that you can only have for 2 years, 4 years, unless it is changed again by another election. Florida Statute 1011.73 states that the millage election shall be held in a manner that is prescribed by law, and then it gives you the statutory reference. And then when you go to that statutory reference, it specifically requires that the election be held on the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November when we hold our regular general election, and it must be done in an even year. How do you create and what is the form of the ballot? So you can have a single millage ballot, or you can actually break it down into 2 different types of millages, one for operations and one for local capital investments reserve funds. If you're going to break it down into the 2 different millages, you must have 2 ballots and the voters have to vote on both of those ballots. Now, the timeline for bringing this forward. The board would have to pass a resolution approximately in March or April. The board will then present it to the Board of County Commissioners with their particular language. Probably by May would be the time frame, just to ensure that there's enough time to process it. The county commissioner will do a ministerial act in approving it, and then direct the supervisor of elections to add it to the ballot. The board will also work with the supervisor of elections once the county commissioners approve to make sure that the ballot referendum is processed appropriately. Normally 180 days is a good time frame. That is what some of our other sister districts do, but we really have about 120 days to make sure that it gets on the ballot for the election pursuant to what the supervisor of election has provided. And then in November, the voters will vote on it.
Thank you, Attorney Dupuy-Bruno. So in a broad analysis of the operational millage and how it is utilized across the state, far and away the most common uses is to enhance salaries, specifically that of teachers as the most predominant case. In most cases, this is just done as an overall salary increase. However, some districts instead frame it around specific positions, such as one district, they framed the programs that could be viewed as important but not necessarily viewed as essential, such as the arts and athletics. So Save the Arts was kind of how they build that, so that theoretically, if the millage were to go away, then that would potentially would result in some type of elimination or significant reduction of positions that would be funded through that type of effort. But again, it varies greatly by districts and how they chose to do it. However, in most cases, it was marketed and applied as a salary increase, and if the millage were discontinued, then the salaries would have to then be reduced or positions would have to be eliminated. The other limited uses, just to speak a little bit more on that salary piece, some districts such as Miami-Dade, for example, they actually put out scenarios so that there's an awareness of if they were to lose that millage, then these are the different ways that those cuts could be assessed. So there's an awareness of what's at stake, both publicly as part of their public documentation. Now, the other limited uses, though, that we saw in this were things such as safety-related costs, technology, mental health, and those were among the most common expenditures, but there were others as well. Now, for the impacts, again, this, I just want to reiterate that, when we talk about impacts, it's very important that we know this should not be misconstrued in any way as advocacy. It simply was the ask was to talk about some of the impacts. So for the overall context, this is often marketed to try and offset what is a market-driven strategy. That's how it's often billed, and that's not just to compete necessarily regionally, but to compete nationally, most specifically often for teachers. The rationales that the various districts use to bring this forward are usually self-evident upon a reading of the marketing materials those districts use, or even reviewing their specific resolutions that they then file where the voter referendum is being pursued. It really outlines the logic of the why behind their ask. So the data on this slide, the data on this slide, but more importantly, the data tables that I've attached to this item, those often are what are utilized to try to explain why a district is pursuing this type of effort. You can see that in the 22-23 school year, 23 of the 67 districts had some voted additional millage. The listing of those specific districts is attached to the agenda item. As it speaks to the national context of why and how this millage was marketed, the typical issue brought up is the per pupil expenditure rate for Florida as compared to the rest of the U.S. Just as a reminder, because this came up earlier, the FEFP formula, that addresses the minimum in an equalization formula. That's the minimum that the state allocates for that piece. That's why these additional discretionary sources can be brought forward to increase beyond that minimum. So the data table from the U.S. Census Bureau that is there, that can actually be reviewed. That shows what the actual per pupil expenditure rate was in Florida, as well as all the other 50 states that are there from 2021. And I want to differentiate that per pupil expenditure rate versus our funding rate, because the expenditure rate then takes all the totality of costs above and beyond that basic FAFP, as well as all the additional costs that are allocated in Florida, which include the voted millages and so forth that can enhance those numbers. So that gives you a sense of where Florida is, not just at the funding level, the basic funding level, but the total revenue as it is compared on that data table. The other often source that is cited in resolutions and marketing materials is information on the rising cost of living. So depending on that source, that estimate can vary by a multitude of factors, but in this case, what we're using, the Census Bureau actually relies upon a cost of living analysis that utilizes the per capita personal consumption that is produced by the U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis. So that data table from the U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis also has included that data table. That's because the U.S. Census Bureau uses that for their estimates of cost of living. So that has also been attached. So just to memorialize two of the specific board questions that were asked: one, how much is generated? Two, does it reduce or impact the teacher shortage? So the response to that would be that it is difficult to discern. So as one might imagine, distinguishing the actual impact of isolating the specific operational millage itself, this additional voted millage, is very difficult to project. The example cited in the board member's question was reducing teacher shortages. For example, do those districts have more or less of a shortage that have this particular piece? However, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that due to the significant variance from district to district, it is hard to separate out that one specific component, as most districts are still experiencing a shortage, and comparing across district lines is usually not an apples to apples comparison. But to at least provide some regional information that is based on the published information from these districts, we have given at least some of that information here. So just decoding this data table, starting with Collier County, they have a 0.35 additional voted millage, whereas by contrast, in the next two listed, both Charlotte and Sarasota, they reflect a full 1 mil in their voted additional millage. And you can see for each district the additional operating revenue that is generated from their certified tax rolls. And this data is from their adopted final budgets this year in September. Then to the right, you can see the instructional vacancy rate, which is a calculation based on the 2 published numbers by each of these districts to the right. So the vacancies are pulled directly from each district's currently posted vacancies, and these are date stamped of October 3rd, so they're lagged, so they are not accurate as of today, but they are accurate as of October 3rd. As well as the total published instructional positions as derived from their final adopted budget books. These published numbers are, again, as I mentioned, lagged from that piece. However, just as in any data, it's so important to highlight that before we do any kind of victory lap, here, there are always major limitations. These are published numbers. So just to use ourselves as an example here, because these are things that can confuse these data stories, and I'd be remiss if I didn't highlight that. So the example I would say is, well, for example, we have a published vacancy of 248. That would exclude budget positions such as like some of our ESSER-funded positions that exist within the budget, but are not filled with people, but also are not being advertised. And so the assumption one would make is that if these 248 are all that there are, and the rest of that balance are in fact filled, which in fact they are not. And that's just what we can do. Now that's not published out on a website, but that is very much the truth. And that's just speaking of the ESSER-funded positions, which we know number over 100, and those are coaches. The intentionality behind why that is the case is because as a district, we have prioritized classroom vacancies. We don't want to be exacerbating our classroom needs by pulling people, hiring them for coaches, then creating an additional need. And so there's a very good reason why that isn't there, but that's the type of information that internally we would have that we don't have in these other districts. So you're only going off of what's published. So I would just say I wouldn't make too much of those instructional vacancy rates, because those are just what we have based on the published available information. In closing, the last part of that, in Lee County, we do not have that additional millage, of course, but we do know what 1 mil would equate to when applied to this year's budget, and that would equate to approximately $139.3 million based on this year's certified tax roll. But again, it's also important to state that that money would not all go to the traditional district. That has to be shared with charter schools, as these districts are, as the law maintains, that they receive a commensurate share of those districts should districts choose to pursue that millage, and should the voters choose to support such a referendum. So we stand ready to take notes and answer any questions that we are able to, but before turning things back to the board discussion, I'd first defer to the superintendent if he has anything he wishes to add to any of the information presented today.
I'd like to thank the team. It's a difficult presentation because they want to just provide the factual information. I hope that we've addressed at least the major concerns. So what is it? What does it equate to? How would we go about it? What are the legal rules? And I have to thank both our attorney, our chief strategy officer, and our CFO for their work. They broke away from several different cabinet meetings on Monday. Mondays, we squirreled time away to put this together. And if you thought Dr. Savage thought the timeline for the strategic plan was tight, getting this ready for today at the level we do. The reality of, websites are websites, right? You're only relying upon that information. We have reached out to Collier County. They've confirmed that those numbers are relatively close and appropriate to what they're looking at. Charlotte has said the same, but we are looking at an apples to oranges comparison right now. I think the other aspect of what does this actually mean for teachers' salaries and how do they use it, that we'll have to update you at another time. That was just not something we could get ready by October 11th, so thank you.
All right. Board members, any questions or comments on this? Yes, Ms. Morgan.
So since I was the one who pushed on this, thank you for bringing up 30 days a number of times. Thank you very much. I know it was asking a lot for a really short period of time, and I'm really grateful for the information you put together. I also want to say I did not do this as an advocate for this. But frankly, during the whole discussion about teacher salaries, our negotiations with TALC, it has frequently been said that we are competing with counties that have additional millage, and that puts us at a disadvantage. So the whole point in my pushing this, and again, thank you very much for being aggressive about this and being so responsive, was to say, if there's interest in the board, then this is something we need to be looking at sooner rather than later, because there is a time frame, as Attorney Dupree-Bruno made clear. So I'm grateful that the board has the information. I'm interested in what other board members think about it, but I did not do this because I am advocating and will be advocating that we move forward on this. I just felt it was important that the public and staff, especially staff, heard us acknowledging the concern about compensation and responding in this way. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Any other comments? Ms. Giovanelli?
One of the questions I have actually is, of those 23 districts that has the millage, do they have also a sales tax? Or is there any of those districts that has the sales tax?
There are some of the school districts listed that would have both the sales tax, half-penny sales tax for their plan, as well as the millage for operational costs. So one would be for capital, the half-penny sales, the other for millage related to how the referendum allows them to use that. We do not have that chart prepared, and rather than going one at a time, we'll get that in a board update. We'll make another column in that chart, and we'll make sure we give you that information as well, Mrs. Giovanelli and board members.
Thank you. The other question I have also is, only in the information, I only see that it was talking about teacher salaries. What, does the millage only strictly adhere to the teacher salaries, or does this also support staff?
It essentially, think of it as additional funds to the general fund. So everything you use your general fund for operationally, that is the same permissible expense. It just increases that millage. That's why it's the same funding source. It's the same permissible uses. And while the teachers are typically the ones marketed, they're very common to also find paraprofessionals and such. Support staff roles were also identified. There's so many different uses. I just didn't go into detail about that, but certainly that was evident that was utilized for a lot of different purposes. But teachers tended to be the most common, but there was definitely support staff as well.
Thank you. But I think it's important to talk about that, because I think sometimes we need to be broader sometimes on that. So thank you very much.
Mr. Fisher?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to everyone up there for going through and collecting the data, the statutes, everything, especially on a compressed time frame. So thank you so much. And again, looking at it, and I believe that's what we're getting at was, in regards to teacher salaries, it looks like the data is inconclusive on this part in regards to at least what we have at the moment. From my standpoint, looking at it, I do not support moving further with this at the moment. Thank you.
Any other comments? I tell you this, what scares me the most about this is, what do you do at the end of 2 or 4 years? If the public says you get the money in, you give everybody an increase in salary of our budget, 139 million or whatever, for the next even 4 years. And then all of a sudden you say, we don't have that anymore. We're having a problem with ESSER funds that we used last year that we don't have. And so it's something I'd have to think long and hard before I could support for that reason. It's just... Ms. Jordan?
I would be interested in having further conversation, because I know you do have a need, and how do we accommodate the needs that we have, and how do we continue to lose the teachers, as well as when we're looking at the 10-year plan and the more that we're going to be building, and the need of more teachers, paras, you name it, we're going to need them. So I would definitely be interested in having more conversation. Thank you.
Any other comments? All right. Thank you for the presentation. Gives us something to think about. Last item on the agenda today is a review of the October 17, 2023 regular agenda. Dr. Bernier?
I did get a couple of questions regarding the agenda. for October 17th. Really appreciate them. They're structured around some of the things we covered yesterday, but one was specifically to I-2. It's the award to approve the ITN number 237465JA compensation structure and framework. This is our job study. I don't know how else to put it. I mean, I know nobody on this dais has all of our ITNs memorized, so let me be clear. And this was what we've discussed related to our fact that we need to do a comprehensive job study in the school district to look at people's responsibilities from bus drivers and custodians all the way through to executive members of the cabinet. There has to be a comprehensive study. We have to look at what people are doing, what their job descriptions say, what they're actually doing in comparison to their job description, and we have to take a hard look at compensation, years of experience, and a number of different items. This is that opportunity for us to do that. So this is a contract with a third party to perform a comprehensive salary schedule, and I think it's really important for the public to hear this. I appreciate the board member asking me specifically. Please make sure the public understands. It examines the salary structure and pay scale of all of our employees across the district. The vendor will perform a comparative analysis of our current salaries and the recommended updated salary structures to increase our competitiveness with similar organizations and to enhance internal equity. So there's twofold to it. One is to look outside how competitive we are with the others, but the also is to look inside to ensure that we have internal equity between positions. So position X with one person in it and position X with another person in it with the same years of experience, is their compensation equitable? This contract has been discussed at length with both unions, and the unions have been supportive of the information because we will share the information with them when the information is gathered later this spring. The staff went through a process with the proposals. Evergreen was chosen over the other proposals because of the comprehensive nature of the work they proposed to do, their commitment to employee involvement and in communication. Sometimes these salary studies can be done via email and little check sheets and handing back. This particular company proposed that they would be more directly involved with employees in increasing the level of communication. And we were also, as we've expressed to you in one-on-ones, interested in the time frame on which this could be performed. Evergreen proposal was the middle of the road in terms of cost, and while many people in the public sometimes believe that school districts must take the low bidder, that is actually not the case. When we looked at the services, the cost, it was the middle of the road, and we felt, the team felt, that they would create the best possible job study and the best information for us this spring, which would allow us to go into the spring and fall better prepared for negotiations and better prepared to do the work to make sure that we're competitive and have internal equity.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions on that one? I have one. What's the timeline on that one?
The timeline of that one is 6 months, 6 to 8 months. They should be done before the end of the school year. We should have results for you in the late spring.
All right, thank you. Anything else or to address?
Oh, other questions. I'm sorry, I thought you were
Yeah.
talking to the board
Nope.
members, sir. My apologies. Yes, there was another question. It was on a consent item on operations. That's the approval for the expenditure increase, ITN number 187323LN. This is very specific to some drainage situations that we have that have been arisen, and there's questions about why is this in the 5 or 10 year plan, and where does the money come from? So first and foremost, the question was why the increase. The increase is due to the increase in drainage related work needed to be completed at several locations. This work is being driven by erosion and settling of existing terrain. To restore these terrains to the original grade and elevation, this bid is being utilized to address necessary repairs and to redirect water flow to other parts of the property to avoid flooding in common areas, walkways, paths, and in extreme cases, some of our buildings. In particular, extensive work has been performed at Pine Island Elementary School already. at the playground, and actually did very well during the hurricane. Quite honestly, by helicopter, it's how I recognized Pine Island, because I could see the playground and how the drainage system they created there worked. However, there's still more to be done, redirecting rainwater from downspouts and gutters to other parts of the facility to minimize flooding. For those of you who know how Pine Island was constructed, it was constructed at a very base level. Those are the original buildings. When you walk onto Pine Island, as you walk further into their buildings, the higher they get. So as Pine Island expanded, somebody was smart to raise the other buildings. Well, now all of those other buildings drain in this location, and it's time in the maintenance plan to make sure we get that work done as well. In the case of Skyline Elementary, after heavy rainfalls, flooding is impacting the paths and staff for students. Additional expenditure will allow the department to regrade and add additional piping to take that water and redirect it to other parts of the campus. This work is included in the 10-year capital plan under modernization projects. It's not necessarily outlined in the 10-year plan like we want to build school X or school Y, but it is outlined in the 10-year capital plan under modernization projects. And the funds will be coming, the $475,000 for day-to-day services. This helps us with all sorts of things as things arise based upon water and changes to the campus. Is coming from capital and operating funds. The $125,000 for Skyline is coming for drainage is coming from capital. The $100,000 for Pine Island drainage is coming from capital, and the $76,000 for vegetation management, as required by Southwest Florida Management District, is also coming from capital.
All right, thank you. Do we have any other questions for the superintendent? Seeing none, we'll go to the good of the order. Mr. Fisher?
I have nothing, thank you.
Mrs. Giovanelli?
I have none, thank you.
Ms. Paprika?
No, thank you.
No. Ms. Jordan?
I can read my report for EDAC. So it's, do we have another meeting right now, or do we have, yeah, we have time?
We have time, go ahead.
Okay, I'll read my report. Okay, so EDAC met on October the 9th. They had 11, at 5:30, they had 11 committee members, and one guest was present. The meeting was opened by Dr. Christopher Blakely, the chair, and then introduced Dr. Malloy, Director of Planning, Growth, and Capacity, who gave a brief description on the middle school proximity plan. He also shared with the district that it has 7 arts application schools. During the Q&A of Dr. Malloy's presentation, he asked the committee what recommendations or ideals they may have to better communicate to all stakeholder parents to get the message out. Some suggestions were made to target rising sixth graders, virtual tools with PDFs in multiple languages to assist the families. Community engagement already scheduled for information purposes. That was that part with Dr. Malloy. Then there was also a conversation, there was a lot of conversation. There was conversation regarding charter schools were brought up as far as the district oversight on them and wanting to make sure that charter schools are being treated, we're making sure that charter schools are doing the same thing that we do. It was a conversation, I wrote it down. Another topic was brought up about a little bit concerns, they get questions regarding parents with, now there's a lot of parents who have 50-50 custodies, and one of them had addressed, a lot of them live in the same zones, but with the way that we have things written, especially because of the parents' rights bills, they want to make sure we're accommodating both parents and their rights. Some children have multiple families and they live in the same zone, but yet we ask them to put one address down, and that's the address that the bus will take them to, and then they are living with the other parent for the rest of the week or that rest of the next week, then they have to walk because the bus only goes to one location. So that was something that was brought up, and they would like us to look into that. Why, if we are in the, especially if they're not out of zone, if they're in the same zone, why are we not accommodating, especially because both parents have the rights to have their child be taken to school and brought home. The other was the chair shared information on the interest survey. They are going to have, the committee will do a interest survey and they will compile topics of interest for the final selection for the committee to work for throughout the year. They also had 2 motions were made and seconded. Conversation was had, they voted on it, and those were kind of like based off of what Ms. Morgan had spoken about with construction committee. And so to follow up, their recommendations was EDAC recommends to the board to consider an exemption to the current committee attendance policy to allow for exemptions of absence due to extenuating circumstances. That was one. The second one was EDAC recommends to the board to consider a committee absence exception for the September 2023 due to untimely notice to new members and reappointed members of their first scheduled meeting. This came out of the fact that we voted on Tuesday to have the committee members voted in, and then that following Monday, they had their first meeting. So some did not have enough time to get on that, which would make them miss one meeting. And so there were several, there was a few that said that they would resign right then and there because they know that they have to miss a meeting coming up due to work schedule in the upcoming months. And so they all spoke about it and asked me to bring this to the board. So I am bringing it to the board as per my duty as the liaison. And that is my report.
Thank you. Ms. Langford Fleming?
I was able to sit in on the calendar committee meeting. I know the calendar is going to be coming forth to the board for approval soon. The draft was made. The biggest discussions, the biggest topics were the early release days that were geared around professional development seemed to be a concern for teachers and staff finding childcare for those times where they've got an hour and a half or whatever the time is left in the school day or on their, on their work day. Discussion of where to place hurricane makeup days. And I think that was really, those were the 2 biggest topics, those severe weather days and those early release days, what to do with them. I know they went back and forth with should there only be 4, should there be 2? I believe 4 is what is going to be on the calendar. And then I believe those were the 2. Oh, and obviously the Jewish holidays, which ones to make sure are on the calendar. And I believe it's Rosh Hashanah this coming year because of where it lands on the October calendar versus Yom Kippur, I think, fell on a Saturday. So that's all I have from the calendar committee.
Thank you. Ms. Morgan?
I have nothing, thank you.
Okay. And the only committee I sat in on was the construction committee. And I got to hear a wonderful presentation of our 10-year capital plan again. But it was very well done and informative to the construction committee, so that was good. Attorney, yes.
If I may, I had also had informed EDAC that we were definitely still having that conversation on the absentees and the meetings. I just wanted to make sure that I stated that as well. I forgot to say that.
So with regards to the more than 2 absences, the board did decide that they were going to include in the policy update that if you are ill, if you have a family member that is ill, or if you are traveling on business, that you can continue to participate. If it's an in-person meeting, probably by phone, or if it's virtually, definitely virtually, so that they had the same circumstances that the board has in its policy. And that will be coming for a second reading before the board next Tuesday.
I have a follow-up question. And then is that when the official policy would take effect, would be after we vote on that? So any absences before really
Yes.
would not count?
It will take, it will become effective next Tuesday.
Okay, that's my understanding. Mr.
So
Jordan?
can you please clarify what you just said? Because I think I heard.
Yeah, our policy of only missing 2 times, plus with excused absences, will take effect for the very first time when we pass it.
Okay, thank you. So in saying that, I just want to make sure, so that people who have missed thus far, they should not be concerned because the policy is not intact at this moment.
Well, the policy is intact because the board approved the original policy last June, but now the board is updating that policy come next Tuesday. So the interpretation would be that the policy as it was prior to next Tuesday stands, and then now the board has a new policy. If the board would like to give some leniency, that's up to the board.
Okay, so that's, I guess, they asked me to speak for them, so I am trying to speak for them. So where do we lie with, and I did tell them that we would be coming back with the 9140, the policy, but where is, if we're going to approve them the day I don't know, 3 or 4 days prior to their meeting, is that giving them ample time to be ready to be at that meeting? And I don't think it's just EDAC, it could apply to many committee members.
So that's through the chair, that's a different question. That's when, that has to do when the board actually approves the new members to be on the committee. So maybe the resolution to that would be to try to get those committee appointees done by August, at the end of August. That way there's a little bit more time. That will be something that we'll have to talk through with staff.
I know as chair, when we bring up this policy, I'd be willing to entertain someone to make a motion to give leniency and start the policy as of that day for those reasons. So that way, people who were put on the last minute, or the people who missed but did not get the opportunity to call in and had a legitimate excuse, and then were not excused. I think there's a lot of reasons for us to do that, start fresh on that policy when we bring that up. So, but I don't think that's the time to do it now.
Okay.
So I think it would be better when we're doing the policy.
Right, because we would have to do a motion.
Correct. I'd entertain a motion. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Sorry, but then again, so what the people, this is why I'm bringing it up, because Ms. Reeder would have to then send out letters to the people who have missed 2 meetings, and one because of the fact that they were not notified in time, or they were notified but did not have ample time to get there, perhaps. I can't speak, I'm not the people. So where do they lay it? Does she send those notifications to tell them they're now off the committees?
So, through the chair, I believe, Ms. Jordan, there's 2 questions. One was with regards to the absences related to illness or things of that nature, and the other one was the timing of the first meeting because they were just appointed. So if the board wants to just provide leniency for both of those events, that's completely up to the board. If they want to do that, that's how you can address it. Or if the board decides just to do it on the absences, that's completely up to the board as well. And then for next year, we will try to keep that in mind when we are scheduling, to make sure we try to schedule it a little bit earlier.
So when does that take place?
So as the chairman indicated, the best time would be, we're going to have public hearing on Tuesday, so when you're adopting those policies, you can make a motion that reflects that. We can pull 9140 out and then make a special motion for 9140.
For leniency for Ms. Absences. All right. Ms. Patrica.
And if I may, just a reminder that our protocols require us to provide notice, 24 hours notice of a motion that's going to be made at the table. So I don't know who's going to take up that mantle, but if we could have 24 hours notice, that'd be great. Thanks.
Mr. Bruno?
Yeah, that's correct.
Anything else, though?
No, I have nothing else. Thank
Okay.
you.
Dr. Bernier?
The only other matter that I think we should address is Ms. Jordan's comment regarding some of our students who live in separate households at the same time. I had a meeting this morning with transportation. I'm going to have the director of transportation or a member of the staff reach out back to me and to Mrs. Jordan. In the case where children are experiencing two households, as long as those households reside within the same proximity zone, then we should be able to get those students, depending on who they're going home to live with that evening, we should be able to get those students to the proper location. The way sometimes I refer to this at the elementary level, we often call our elementary school buses by name. So the kids that ride one bus are called Starfish, another group are called, Seahorses. If a student on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday is a Starfish because he lives with mom, and he's a Seahorse on Thursday, Friday because of dad, we can make that accommodation. The issue becomes, and that's why it's important for specificity when these things arise, that we have someone to work with. If dad lives outside of the zone, so if the student is going to elementary or middle school in North Fort Myers, but dad lives in Bonita Springs, that's when a bus transportation system is outside of our bounds to be able to help and support with that situation. So Focus only does take one address, and parents certainly have custodial agreements that they provide to the main office so that we can abide by what their rules and regulations are. So we will look into that matter and ensure that those students who have the opportunity, as long as there's a bus going by dad's house or mom's house, we should be able to get the student on the right bus.
All right. Well, thank you. At this point, having no other business to come before this body and seeing no objection, this meeting is adjourned. The time is 3:07 p.m.